At my $985,000 housewarming, my sister grabbed my arm. "This house is perfect for my family." Mom added, "Pack your things." I hit play on the TV. When I watched my sister and mother stroll into the welcoming event for my new house, I knew something was about to happen. A home that mirrored every sacrifice, late night, and ounce of effort I put into creating my IT firm. Nonetheless, the knot in my gut tightened and my skin crawled as I recognized the look in their eyes. The exact expression I saw when I was 21, the night my entire life fell apart. Growing up in Boston, our family seemed to be rather average. Dad works in finance, while Mom operates a boutique with 2 girls and a golden retriever named Buddy. However, as the phrase goes, looks may be deceiving. When I was 13, the cracks started to emerge. Dad walked out, and while the divorce was not very dramatic, what followed next set the stage for years of pure family dysfunction. Camille, 4 years my senior, subsequently married Andrew, an investment banker from a wealthy family. Their wedding was magnificent, but Mom spent more than $65,000 she didn't have, claiming that a daughter only gets married once. I was 20, working 2 jobs, attending community college, and just scraping by to buy my bridesmaid outfit. Then came the babies. Lucas, Madeline, and Noah. Camille's entitlement grew with each child, and Mom was always willing to assist them out, even if it cost me. "Your sister has 3 children to feed," Mom would say. "What do you need the additional money for? Books? Couldn't you just utilize the library?" Meanwhile, I was pushing myself to exhaustion. Scholarships were helpful, but without family support. I worked as a barista in the mornings, tutored in the afternoons, and data entry clerk on weekends. Sleep was a luxury I couldn't afford. Dad slipped into obscurity after relocating to Chicago and beginning a new family. Mom made it tough for him to communicate with me by failing to alert me when he phoned or accidentally deleting his messages. But I persevered. While Camille posted stunning family vacation photos, I worked up all night coding and researching. I graduated at the top of my class. Mom attended my high school graduation but departed early since Camille phoned. Lucas had a slight fever. I've never complained. I simply accepted this as my reality and became driven to achieve success on my own terms. I didn't need their approval. What I didn't foresee was how dramatically things would change on my 21st birthday. That night shaped everything that happened afterward, culminating in the battle 11 years later. My 21st birthday happened on a Tuesday. I remember because I was able to take the evening off, which was unusual. I wasn't anticipating a big celebration. Camille and Andrew were expecting their 3rd child and had the whole family's attention. Still, turning 21 seemed significant. I was legally an adult, had finished high school, and had won partial scholarships to 3 institutions. When I got home after tutoring, I found Mom and Camille at the kitchen table, preoccupied in spreadsheets. They hardly glanced up. Leftover lasagna in the refrigerator. "If you're hungry," Mom said, her gaze riveted on the papers. I heated up a dish and joined them, fascinated. "What are you working on?" Mom inquired, looking up. "Just sorting out some financial issues. Camille and Andrew need a bigger house now that Noah is on his way." I nodded, used to similar conversations. But through me. "Why do you have my college suddenly a shutter paperwork?" Camille sighed heavily. "We might as well tell her, Mom." Mom straightened the papers and gave me that familiar look that normally precedes a family sacrifice. "Evelyn, we need to discuss your college plans," my mother informed me, Camille expecting again. "They truly need a 4-bedroom home. Andrew's bonus was not as high as they had anticipated this year, and they are a little strained." I sat patiently, knowing precisely where this was going. "The point is," Camille explains, "we have calculated everything. Even with Andrew's salary and Mom's assistance with the down payment, we are still short." "Short for what?" I queried, even though I was already aware. "We need to use your college fund," Mom explained. "Honestly, it's not like you don't already have scholarships. And community college is completely legitimate. You can transfer to a university later when things are less stressful for the family. My college fund, which Dad had begun before to the divorce, and Mom's promised money for my education remained unaffected. I was counting on this cash to fill the gap created by scholarships. "But that is my money," I responded softly. Camille rolled her eyes. "Dad set it aside for my education." "Don't be selfish, Evelyn. We're talking about a house for your niece and nephew. Where should they sleep? Should Noah just live in a closet because you want to attend a prestigious university?" "That's not what I'm saying," I protested. "But I've worked so hard for this. I maintained a 3.9 GPA despite working numerous jobs. These scholarships will not cover everything. You can take out loans like everyone else, Camille shouted. Andrew and I have a mortgage. That is life. Or she might have said, you might live at home and go to community college. That would be a lot more cost-effective. Something inside me moved. A lifetime of compliance and acceptance gave way to utter indignation. No. A single phrase lingered in the air. Mom blinked, anticipating no opposition from me. Excuse me? No, I said more loudly this time. The money is for my studies. Dad. You've laid it aside for me. It's not Camille's house money. Mom's face hardened. Evelyn. This isn't a negotiation. This is what's occurring. Your sister has a family to support. And I have a future to build, I said, my voice shaking. I've earned those scholarships. I worked while keeping flawless grades. Camille chuckled coldly, dismissively. I deserve to use my college fund for college. Oh, please. Assuming you understand anything about genuine responsibility. Try having 3, rushed, children before you lecture us on what you deserve. Tears threatened, but I held back. This is not fair, and you know it. Mom got up, scraping her chair. Education is my top priority, I said. That is not incorrect. Well then, Mom responded, folding her arms. If that is your attitude, you have a decision to make. Accept that the money will be used to aid your sister, or pack your bags and embark on your own journey. You're 21 now, after all. An ultimatum hung in the air. Camille grinned, knowing I would back down like I usually did. But something had broken within me. Years of being second best, putting Camille's needs before my own. I stood up softly. I will pack my bags. If I hadn't been so terrified, the surprise on their faces would have been pleasant. Mom definitely did not expect me to choose independence. Do not be so dramatic, Camille mocked. Where would you even go? I didn't answer. I walked into my bedroom and got out my largest bag. I packed my clothes, toiletries, laptop, and important papers methodically. Family photos hung on the walls. They didn't feel like mine anymore. Mom came at my doorway as I zipped the suitcase closed. You're being foolish. Sleep on it. And we will debate it logically in the morning. There is nothing to discuss, I murmured, taken aback by my own calm. You have stated your stance clearly. I'm making mine clear too. I pushed my luggage past her, grabbed my bag from the rack at the front door, and went outside into the darkness. Nobody called after me. Nobody attempted to stop me. That night I slept in my car in the Walmart parking lot, using my work outfit as a pillow. For 3 weeks, I stuck to that regimen, working 4 jobs, sleeping in my car, and bathing at the gym where I had a discounted membership. I told no one. On the 17th day, my computer science instructor, Professor Helen Whitaker, noticed me sleeping in the library. She gently awakened me and asked if everything was okay. Something in her soft eyes shattered my carefully maintained composure, so I told her everything. That evening she brought me to her home and showed me the guest room. It is yours until you figure things out, she stated simply. No one should have to face this alone. Professor Whitaker became more than simply a teacher. She became my mentor's champion and the first one to believe in me wholeheartedly. She helped me secure further scholarships, walked me through financial aid forms, and provided a critical reference for an internship that would ultimately transform my life. Everything that followed the night I was booted out was influenced by that event. It demonstrated that I was entirely alone, yet that chosen family may be more supportive than biological relatives. Most importantly, it proved my own strength, which I was unaware I possessed until I was forced to acknowledge it. With Professor Whitaker's assistance, I was able to get sufficient financial aid scholarships and part-time jobs to attend a local public university rather than my preferred school. It wasn't Boston University, but it did have a solid computer science program, which I loved. My college experience differed significantly from that of my peers. While others partied and joined clubs, I performed a variety of jobs to stay afloat, including waitressing, manning the university IT help desk, and doing freelance web development projects late at night. Sleep became a luxury, and social interactions were non-existent. Despite my rigorous schedule, I kept a perfect GPA. The computer science curriculum went well, and I found myself supporting classmates who were suffering, one of which was Sophia Tran. Sophia, a smart but distracted individual, became my closest friend and ultimately business partner. We were starkly different in various ways. I was methodical. She was impulsive. I excelled at back-end programming. She had a talent for user experience and design. Together, we were ideal. During our junior year, we began discussing creating a money management software for young adults. The bulk of current tools were built for folks who were already financially comfortable, not for people like us who were living paycheck to paycheck. We recognized a gap and were eager to address it. We developed a prototype using resources on campus. We named it Sen, an app that allows users to view their spending, automate their savings, and establish responsible credit. Our professors were impressed, but more importantly, our classmates found it very useful. After college, Sophia and I had to choose between steady corporate positions and pursuing our entrepreneurial goals. The safe choice sounded enticing, especially given my financial situation. However, I recalled Professor Whitaker's comments. Sometimes the riskiest road yields the biggest benefits. To save money, we took a gamble and moved into a small roach-infested flat. We dedicated ourselves completely to Sen. I programmed while eating ramen. Sophia worked on user interfaces until dawn. We attended every networking event, pitch competition, and startup program we could find. 7 months of rejections followed. Investors felt we were too young, inexperienced, or targeted the incorrect demographics. College students do not care about financial planning, one venture entrepreneur commented dismissively. But we persisted. We had a breakthrough when we obtained a small business grant, allowing us to recruit our first employee, a marketing specialist who helped us refine our messaging. We made a modest modification, concentrating on recent graduates with student debt rather than current students. The app gained traction gradually and then dramatically. We were featured on a tech blog. A financial influencer with millions of followers promoted Sen, and our user base grew from thousands to hundreds of thousands. Throughout the procedure, I had occasional ideas of contacting my family. I'd had virtually little interaction since that night. Mom called 4 months after I left, not to apologize, but to let me know that they had spent my college fund on Camille's down payment. Dad texted me from time to check in, but our connection remained distant. Instead, I concentrated on expanding my business and personal life. Years passed in a frenzy of code meetings and ultimate success. Sophia and I moved from our modest accommodation to a respectable workplace. We hired extra developers, customer service representatives, and marketing professionals. Sen expanded into a full financial platform. 6 years after our founding, we got an acquisition offer from one of the country's leading financial technology companies. The sum was overwhelming enough to make Sophia and I rich several times over. We eventually reached an agreement after weeks of talks. I was 31 years old and suddenly wealthy than I had imagined imaginable. The concerned 21-year-old sleeping in her car looked to be a different person. Financial security gave people the freedom to make rational judgments rather than rash ones. I invested the most of my windfall, donated to scholarships for first-generation college students, and ultimately allowed myself to explore creating a real house, rather than just a place to sleep between work shifts. After months of searching, I found it. A magnificent craftsman-style home in an upscale neighborhood. At $985,000, it was a significant investment, but it was well within my budget. The 4-bedroom home has character and charm, with hardwood floors, wide windows, a wraparound porch, and a spacious lawn. It required work, but I saw its promise straight immediately. As I signed the closing paperwork, I thought about the irony. My education fund was spent 11 years ago to assist Camille purchase a larger home. I was now able to purchase a property for around $1 million by my own efforts. During the renovation, I received an unexpected message from my father. He saw the news of Sen's takeover online and wanted to congratulate me. Our conversation was uncomfortable, yet it offered new opportunities. He indicated that he had lost track of me after I left and was too ashamed to look further for me. He got divorced again and returned to Boston. Would I consider meeting for coffee? That coffee encounter was heated yet healing. Dad apologized for being absent during my difficult years. He admitted he was aware of the college fund situation but felt unable to act. I did not forgive him immediately away, but I admired his candor. We agreed to work on gradually re-establishing our relationship. During our conversation, he confessed that Camille and Andrew were having financial issues again. Apparently they had to downsize once Andrew's firm was reorganized. Mom continued to support them in every way she could. "They don't know about your success," Dad said. "I have not told them." I nodded, unsure how I felt about it. Part of me wanted them to know how successful I was despite their lack of support. Another half wanted that my successes be kept private. As my house renovations neared completion, I organized a housewarming party. After much thinking, I added my family to the guest list. Sophia feared that I was setting myself up for disappointment. But I thought it was time to close that chapter of my life, one way or another. I sent official invites to Dad, Mom, Camille and Andrew. Dad responded quickly with acceptance. Mom called, surprised yet pleased. Camille texted, "I look forward to seeing how you're doing. We will be there." The stage was set for a reunion. I never anticipated something so dramatic. The morning of my housewarming celebration was bright and beautiful. Despite staying up late to finish the house, I got up early. Each room was excellent. The living room with its comfortable sectional and built-in bookshelves, the gourmet kitchen with marble countertops and professional-grade appliances, the dining room that can seat up to 10 people, and 4 beautifully appointed bedrooms upstairs, including a master suite with a balcony that overlooks the backyard. Sophia came about 10:30, filled with champagne and decorations. "Are you certain you want to go through with this?" she queried while arranging flowers. "It is not too late to uninvite them." "I need closure," I responded, my stomach twisting at the thought of seeing my mother and sister again. "Besides, these are just 3 out of 28 visitors. If things become difficult, we will have plenty of buffers." The caterers arrived at lunchtime and set up stations on the first floor. By 3:30, everything was ready. Food, beverages, music, and my nerves were frazzled. My colleagues in technology arrived first, followed by neighbors. Professor Helen Whitaker arrived with her husband, embraced me heartily and whispered her pride. Friends from college, industry acquaintances, and my financial advisor round out the early visitors. At 5 o'clock the doorbell rang again. I opened it to see my father standing awkwardly on the porch with a present bag. "Dad," I said, the words still sounding strange. "Evelyn," he continued, glancing at the home behind me. "This is impressive." I invited him in, gave him a brief tour, and introduced him to several of our visitors. He seemed genuinely pleased to see how well I was doing, albeit a bit out of place among the affluent professionals that filled my house. "Your mother and sister should be here soon," he stated. "They were going to get together." I nodded and refilled my water glass to hide my concern. "So, how are they?" Dad hesitated. "Managing Andrew's work position has been difficult for them. They sold their home last year and moved into a townhouse. Your mother, Elaine, is very helpful with the kids." Before I could respond, Sophia arrived at my elbow. "More guests are arriving," she added. "Including, I believe, your mother and sister." I took a deep breath and approached the front door. There they stood, Elaine, scarcely aged after 11 years, and Camille, still attractive but with stress lines around her eyes. Behind them stood Andrew, who seemed much older and more weathered than I recalled, and their 3 children, Lucas, a teenager, Madeline, a pre-teen, and Noah, approximately 10 years old. "Evelyn," Mom said, her tone hesitant. "Thank you for inviting us." "Welcome," I responded, stepping back to allow them in. "Please come in." The children lingered back meekly, clearly told to be on their best behavior. I smiled at them. I hardly knew these nieces and nephews. "There is a game room upstairs if you get bored," I informed them. "Second door on the right." This broke the ice a little. Lucas asked whether I had a game system, and once I responded yes, the kids headed upstairs. After a short thank you, Andrew commented, "Beautiful home." He looked about with professional curiosity. "The architectural details are impressive." "Thank you," I said. "The renovation took 7 months, but it was worth it." Camille lifted her eyes. "You must have had quite a team working on it." "I did," I said without more elaboration. "Would you want a tour?" As I led them around the home, Camille's manner became more calculating. She ran her fingers over the marble surfaces, looked into closets, and remarked on the wonderful play area in the rear. Mom followed more quietly, occasionally commenting on the decor or inquiring about a detail. "This must have been quite an investment," she eventually said as we walked inside the main bedroom. "It was," I said, "but I have been fortunate in my career." "What exactly are you doing right now?" Camille asked, sitting uninvited on the side of my bed. Dad mentioned something about an app. I told them a truncated version of my success story, and their expressions changed from polite inquiry to surprise. "Did you sell your firm for millions?" Camille inquired, her voice louder than normal. "We did," I answered. The timing was right. The tour moved downstairs where more guests had arrived. I presented my family to Sophia, Professor Helen Whitaker, and colleagues and friends who were familiar with my story. Throughout the introductions I noticed Mom and Camille gathering in corners, speaking furiously. Andrew looked detached from their conversations, instead chatting with my tech industry contacts. 1 hour into the party, I clinked my glass to draw everyone's attention. "Thank you for coming to celebrate this new chapter with me. This house signifies more than simply a place to live. It is a milestone that I previously thought was unreachable. I am grateful to everyone who helped me along the road. As I ended my brief remark, Camille approached. As Evelyn's sister, I would like to say something too. Her voice had the confident tone I remembered from childhood, the sound that usually preceded her achieving precisely what she wanted. Family is everything, she said, placing her palm on my arm. And seeing Evelyn's beautiful home today has made me realize how perfect this would be for our family. The visitors exchanged perplexing whispers. What Camille means, Mom said quietly, is that we are very proud of Evelyn for creating a space where family can gather. No, Camille exclaimed, tightening her grip on my arm. I mean, this house would be ideal for my family. With Andrew's career position and the kids requiring decent schools, we've been hunting for just this type of house in exactly this neighborhood. The room became quiet. Even the caterer had stopped moving. Camille, Andrew said, his face burning. This is not the time or place. It is exactly the right time, she informed us. Evelyn has always wanted to aid her family. She is unmarried, without children, and certainly doing well financially. This 4-bedroom house is wasted on one person when we have 3 growing children who need space and stability. Mom gave a sympathetic nod. I stood motionless, not believing what I was hearing. After 11 years of no communication since seizing my college fund, they were now requesting, nay expecting, that I give them my home. Evelyn, Mom said, her voice taking on that authoritative tone I knew all too well. You need to gather your belongings and locate a smaller place. A downtown condo would be much more suitable for your lifestyle, and it would mean the world to your sister's family. Camille was already pacing the living room, pointing out the changes they intended to make. Lucas could have the bedroom with the bay window. Madeline would love the purple room, and Noah would have plenty of room for his toys in the smallest bedroom. Mom joined in. After everything Camille has gone through, she deserves this. It is the least you could do as her sister. The room had become completely silent. My visitors looked at us with terrified fascination. Sophia rushed to my side, offering support but remaining silent. I took a deep breath, feeling strangely calm despite the absurd scene that was unfolding. I have something to show you, I said quietly as I collected my phone. I used the smart home system to connect my phone to the large television in the main room. With a few touches, I opened a document and projected it on the screen. What is this? Camille inquired anxiously. This, I explained, is a restraining order I filed 11 years ago after you kicked me out on my 21st birthday. The room fell silent as the legal document appeared on the screen. Even the caterer remained motionless, trays in hand. What are you talking about? Mom's voice broke the silence, full of confusion and outrage. We've never kicked you out. You chose to leave. I maintained a steady voice, years of practice paying off. You issued an ultimatum on my 21st birthday. Accept that my college funds would go toward Camille's down payment or pack my bags. I packed my bags. You didn't stop me. That was a disagreement, not an eviction, Camille snorted, her eyes fixed on the document. You are being dramatic. I slept in my car for 3 weeks, I simply explained. In February, in Boston. A murmur spread among the assembled guests. Dad stepped forward, his face pale. I didn't realize it was that bad, he said gently. You never told me. Would it have mattered? I inquired. He made no response to that. I swiped to the next document in my phone. This is more interesting, however. This is why I filed the restraining order. The screen now showed credit reports and loan applications in my name, all from shortly after I left the house. What is this? Andrew inquired, leaning closer to the screen, his financial background assisting him in understanding what he was witnessing before the others. After I left, someone opened 4 credit cards and took out a personal loan in my name, I told the officer. They had my social security number, birth certificate, and enough personal information to answer security questions. The total debt was slightly more than $52,000. Mom's face turned white. Camille became very interested in her wine glass. Fortunately, I added, the detective who assisted me was thorough. Camille used her credit cards at various stores. The loan funds were deposited in an account, which then transferred the exact amount to your joint checking account, Andrew. Andrew carefully turned to face his wife. You told me that money was from your mother, a gift to help with the down payment. It was, says Camille. Mom helped arrange it by committing identity theft against your own daughter. Professor Helen Whitaker interrupted, her intellectual demeanor giving way to protective rage. That is a felony, in case you were not aware. I am sure there has been some mix-up, my mother said. This is the police report I filed, I explained, displaying another document. I had sufficient evidence to file charges for identity theft and fraud. The detective was especially interested in this loan application. I concentrated on a signature where someone attempted to imitate my signature but misspelled my middle name. Camille's hand shook so violently that she had to set down her wineglass. "If you filed charges, why weren't we arrested?" she inquired, her voice lacking conviction. "Because I did not pursue it," I replied simply. "I was 21, terrified, but you were still my family, so I struck a deal with the detective. I would pay off the fraudulent debts myself if they documented everything but refrained from prosecuting." I swiped to another document. "This is proof of payment. Every penny of that $52,000, plus interest, was paid by me over 4 years while I was putting myself through college, working 4 jobs, sleeping 5 hours a night, and eating ramen noodles to survive while paying off debt I had never incurred." Andrew appeared physically ill. "I had no idea," he said softly, his voice barely audible. "Camille told me her parents were helping with the down payment as a gift." "Just one parent," I explained gently. "And it wasn't a gift. It was theft." Mom finally spoke up. "You're twisting everything to make yourself the victim. We've always done everything we could for you. Sometimes families have to make difficult decisions for the greater good." "The greater good?" Dad inquired, his voice rising unexpectedly. "Elaine was 21. Our daughter. And you stole from her." Mom turned on him. "Do not dare to judge me, Thomas. You walked away. You left me to deal with everything." "I left you, not our daughters," he responded. "And I absolutely did not authorize you to steal Evelyn's college fund or commit fraud in her name." "I knew about the college fund," he said, turning to me. "I'm sorry I didn't fight harder for you, but I had no idea about the credit cards and loan." I nodded, accepting his incomplete apologies for what they were. Camille changed her approach after seeing her support crumble. "It was a difficult time," she confessed, tears welling in her eyes. "We had a baby and needed a home. Mom was just trying to help us, and you weren't there to ask." "Maybe," I said. "But that doesn't excuse fraud." I swiped to another document. "Andrew, you might be interested in this too. While investigating the identity theft, I learned a lot about your family finances. These are records of 7 failed business ventures that Camille invested in without your knowledge and with joint funds. The total losses over 9 years exceeded $240,000. Andrew's face turned pale. "Which business ventures?" "Her college friend Brianna's clothing boutique, her cousin's restaurant, and a subscription box service for luxury pet products, among others," I wrote down on paper. "Everyone failed within a year. Everyone received significant investments from your family accounts." "Those were personal loans to friends," Camille explained faintly. "They were going to pay back everything with interest." "Is that why you kept the paperwork hidden?" The room had become uncomfortably tight. Guests were looking for ways out, unsure whether to stay during this clearly private family crisis. "I think," I said loudly, "that we've gotten off track. You came here today to claim my home, assuming that I would once again sacrifice my needs for Camille's desires. I am making it clear that this will never happen again." "So you will throw your own sisters the street?" Mom asked. "Where's your compassion?" "My family out on compassion?" I laughed, but it wasn't funny. "Where was your compassion when I was sleeping in my car during the winter? Where was your compassion when you stole my identity and left me with massive debt before I even started college?" Mom opened her mouth, then closed it again. "I am not throwing anyone out on the street," I clarified softly. "But I will not give up my home. If you require financial assistance, I am happy to discuss setting up education funds for Lucas, Madeline, and Noah. They are innocent in all of this, and I want to know my nieces and nephews." "We do not need your charity," Camille snapped, despite Andrew's expression indicating otherwise. "It is not charity," I answered. "It's the right way to help family," Mom said, grabbing her purse. "I believe we have heard enough. Camille, children, we're leaving." I reminded her that the children were upstairs playing video games. "And I think Andrew might want to stay." Andrew nodded slowly. "I need to understand exactly what has been happening with our finances," my husband said. "Kids will be fine for a while longer." "Fine," my mother responded. "Camille, let us go." Sophia took a step closer to the door. "I believe that is best. This is supposed to be a celebration of Evelyn's new home, not a place to commit property theft." Mom's face turned crimson red. "How dare you? This is a family matter." "Yes," Sophia said. "Evelyn's chosen family is here to support her. Before you return, you should consider what real family support looks like. After they left, The party gradually regained momentum, though discussions naturally focused on the dramatic incident. Andrew remained in the corner, speaking quietly with my financial advisor and checking his phone for Camille's texts. Later, as the guests were leaving, he approached me and formally said, "I owe you an apology. I had no idea about identity theft or investments. I knew about the college fund, but Camille informed me that you had agreed to it. Would it have mattered if you knew the truth?" I questioned. He considered it. "I'd like to think so, but the truth is that I was different back then. Success and money were all that mattered." He looked around the room. "Looking at what you have built on your own, I realized how misguided my priorities have been." "What will you do now?" I inquired. "Have a very difficult conversation with my wife," he said solemnly. "And probably contact a divorce attorney. The financial deceptions are too significant to ignore." I felt an unexpected pang of sadness for my sister. Despite her imperfections, I never wished her marriage to end. "I meant what I said about education funds for the children," I told him. "Regardless of what happens between you and Camille," he nodded graciously. "They would like to know their aunt, especially Lucas. He is interested in programming." After Andrew left to pick up the children, Sophia and I started cleaning up. "Well," she began, tossing glasses into the dishwasher. "That was the most dramatic housewarming I have ever attended." I laughed and felt lighter than I had in years. Not exactly the closure I expected, but closure nonetheless. "Do you think they will try to contact you again?" Sophia inquired. "Mom and Camille. Eventually when they need something." I shut the dishwasher and straightened up. "But next time I will be prepared. No more doormat, Evelyn." As the final guest left and silence descended over my new home, I wandered through each room, admiring what I had created. Not only was it a physical structure, but it also represented a life achieved through dedication, hard work, and the confidence to stand up for myself when it counted most. The days after the housewarming were unexpectedly tranquil. I expected Mom and Camille to torment me with angry phone calls, manipulative texts, and possibly even unannounced visits. Instead, quiet. Andrew phoned me and asked to meet at a coffee shop near his office. "Camille moved in with your mother," he told me over lattes 4 days after the party. "She took the kids for now, but we have agreed to equal custody while we sort things out." "I am sorry about your marriage," I stated truthfully. He shrugged, appearing fatigued and relieved. "After what came to light at your party, I started digging deeper into our finances. It is worse than you know. We are not just struggling. We are nearly bankrupt." "How is that possible?" "You had a good position at the investment firm," had he reiterated. "I was let go 7 months ago, downsizing. I have been working as a financial consultant since then, but making about a third of my previous salary." Meanwhile, Camille continued spending as though nothing had changed. He pushed the folder across the table. "These are statements from accounts I did not even know existed. Credit cards maxed out. Loans I never signed for. Second mortgages on the house before we sold it." While reviewing the records, I experienced a sense of déjà vu. "She did to you what she and Mom did to me?" I inquired. "Except on a much larger scale." He agreed grimly. "We are talking hundreds of thousands in debt." "What will you do?" "Bankruptcy seems inevitable," he admitted. I nodded in understanding. "My offer for education funds still stands. I can set up accounts that can only be used for educational expenses." "That would mean everything," he remarked with sincere gratitude in his voice. "And maybe would you consider spending time with them occasionally? They need stable adults in their lives right now." That conversation signaled the beginning of a new chapter for myself, Andrew, and the children. They were intelligent, inquisitive children who withstood their parents' disagreement with surprising perseverance. Around 3 weeks after the housewarming, Dad invited me to supper. Over pasta at a quiet restaurant, he expressed his thoughts on years of family strife. "I failed you," he admitted honestly. "After the divorce, Elaine made it difficult to maintain contact, but that is no excuse. I should have fought harder to stay involved in your life." "Why did you not?" I asked, finally putting my thoughts into words. "After 11 years, he sighed heavily. "Partly guilt. The divorce was my fault. I had an affair with my second wife. Before leaving. Elaine knew, and she used that as leverage to control everything, including access to you girls. This discovery altered my view of our family relationships, but it did not excuse his absence. I also failed to protect your college fund," he added. "It was in a joint account with Elaine. I trusted her to use it appropriately despite our problems. When I found out what happened, I was too ashamed to confront you about it." "You could have helped me when I was sleeping in my car," I stated. "I did not know," he said. "Elaine told me you had moved in with a friend from school. By the time I learned otherwise, months had passed, and you had stopped responding to my messages. We talked for hours that night, clearing up years of misconceptions, half-truths, and downright lies. Dad was not blameless, but I realized he had been manipulated by Mom almost as much as I had. Your mother was not always like this, he clarified. After Camille was born, something changed. She became obsessed with creating a perfect life for her, often at your expense. I tried to balance things to advocate for you, but it only created more conflict. Why the favoritism? I inquired, the question that had plagued my childhood. He pondered this attentively. I think Camille reminded Elaine of herself, the self she wanted to be. Beautiful, socially adept, traditional. You are more like me. Analytical, independent, questioning. And I think that scared her. The first communication from Camille came 3 days after my meal with Dad, a long email that alternated between apology and justification. She admitted to identity theft, but blamed it on financial desperation and her mother's influence. She apologized for the housewarming argument, but insisted that her family's needs took precedence over my luxury. Classic Camille, Sophia observed as I gave her the email, apologizing without actually accepting responsibility. At least she is acknowledging what happened, I said, feeling more generous now that I was safe from her influence. That is progress. Mother's approach was more straightforward. She began phoning every day, leaving voicemails that ranged from angry accusations to sad pleas. Families should forgive each other, she said in one message. We made mistakes, but so have you by embarrassing us in front of your friends. I did not respond to either of them right away. Instead, I focused on setting clear boundaries with my therapist, Dr. Allison Monroe. Your mother and sister exhibit classic patterns of manipulative behavior, Dr. Monroe observed during one session. They are used to you eventually giving in. Your continued boundary setting is unfamiliar and threatening to them. I feel guilty sometimes, I told her. Especially about the kids being caught in the middle. That is natural, she assured me. But remember, you are modeling healthy boundaries for those children, and you are supporting them directly through the education, funds and quality time. That is genuine family support, not the conditional kind you received. Andrew and Camille's circumstances worsened over the course of several weeks. Their divorce proceedings uncovered other financial deceptions. Andrew filed for bankruptcy as planned. Camille and the children remained in Mom's modest home, which had become cramped and tense. 7 months after the housewarming, Andrew got a better job at a smaller company and rented a 3-bedroom apartment. The custody arrangement granted him access to the children every other week. Throughout his weeks, I would pay Lucas several visits, assisting him with programming assignments or simply offering another supportive adult presence. During one of these encounters, Andrew mentioned that Camille had started therapy. Her therapist suggested it might help with the divorce and financial issues. I am skeptical about her commitment. But it is a start, he told me. Around the same time, I finally agreed to meet Mom for coffee. The conversation was difficult, but respectful. She had aged significantly in the 7 months since the celebration. Living with Camille and the children is challenging, she told me. There is no privacy, no peace, and her spending habits. She paused, shaking her head. You enabled those habits, I kindly pointed out. I wanted her to have everything I did not, Mom explained, an uncommon example of self-awareness. I grew up poor, wore hand-me-downs, never had the nice things other girls had. I swore my daughter would have better. You had 2 daughters, I reminded her. She had the decency to appear embarrassed. I understand. I convinced myself you were stronger, more independent, that you did not need the same support. It was not a complete apology, but it was the closest I had ever gotten. This decades-long pattern of financial deception taught me that Mom's behavior was more than just favoritism. It revealed underlying issues of control, entitlement, and possibly untreated mental health problems. Meanwhile, Camille's therapy looked to be generating actual results. Our weekly meals with the kids moved from awkward to cautiously enjoyable. She got a job as an administrative assistant at a local company, her first serious job since marriage, and moved into a modest apartment when living with Mom became too expensive for both of them. I have never learned to stand on my own, she admitted at one of our discussions. Mom did everything for me. Then Andrew took over. When everything fell apart, I had no idea how to function independently. I felt an unexpected sense of compassion as I saw her struggle with fundamental adult chores like budgeting, meal planning, and home maintenance. Camille, like me, had been a victim of Mom's dysfunction, albeit in a different way. Her golden child status had hampered her ability to build resilience and self-sufficiency. The children adapted to their new situation with surprising adaptability. Lucas, now 12, thrived in the coding group I introduced him to. Madeline acquired a fascination for science that neither Camille nor Andrew had recognized. Noah's dinosaur passion grew into a more general interest in natural history. I established college funds for each of them, with the condition that the funds be spent solely for educational purposes, a safeguard against history repeating itself. Andrew and I formed an unexpected friendship based on mutual respect. He confronted the financial calamity full-on, gradually repairing his credit and profession while becoming a more present father than he had ever been during his marriage. The bankruptcy was humiliating, he admitted, but freeing. Not all relationships could be saved, however. Mom continued to avoid actual accountability, alternating between superficial apologies and sly explanations. During one especially challenging meal, she mentioned that my success was owed in part to her tough love style. If we had not pushed you out of the nest, would you have developed the same drive, she wondered, as if my homelessness had been a deliberate teaching moment rather than abandonment. I cautiously set down my fork. That is like saying abuse makes people stronger. Some survive despite it, not because of it. I succeeded in spite of how you treated me. Not because of it. She swiftly changed the subject, as she was always uncomfortable with direct confrontation. These incidents confirmed Dr. Monroe's assessment that while Mom may change her conduct to preserve contact, true remorse or insight may never arrive. Some people are not capable of the depth of self-reflection necessary for genuine change. You can adjust your expectations accordingly, Dr. Monroe told me, and decide what kind of limited relationship, if any, serves your well-being. By the time my house's 18-month anniversary neared, I had set clear guidelines for family interaction. Monthly lunches with Camille and the kids, occasional coffees with Mom, regular dinners with Dad, and more frequent time with the kids during Andrew's custody weeks. To commemorate the event, I arranged a small gathering in stark contrast to the previous year's grand housewarming. Sophia accompanied her new fiancé. Professor Helen Whitaker and her husband attended. Dad arrived with Rebecca, their relationship now serious. Andrew brought the kids for a few hours. Even Camille made a brief and charming visit. Mom was noticeably absent, her choice after I declined to invite certain toxic family friends she insisted on including. It was a little but crucial win in keeping my boundaries. And, as the evening progressed and people had dessert on the patio, Lucas approached me with his laptop. "Aunt Evelyn, can you look at my code? I am trying to build a game, but the graphics will not render properly." We sat on the porch swing, solving his JavaScript issues as fireflies blinked in the coming dusk. The simple moment, an aunt assisting her nephew, family members supporting one another in healthy ways, brought tears to my eyes which I quickly wiped away. "Are you okay?" Lucas inquired, noting my emotion. "More than okay," I told him. "Just happy you're here." Later that night when everyone had left, I wandered through my home, which was genuinely mine in every way. The house had become a haven, not only from the outer world, but also from the harmful family habits that had nearly ruined me. Within these confines, I had created new rituals, connections, and a new understanding of family that was based on mutual respect rather than duty or manipulation. My journey from sleeping in my van at 21 to owning this lovely home at 31 was not solely about financial gain. It was about reclaiming my worth, setting healthy boundaries and creating a life that reflected my ideals rather than others' expectations. My ties with my family would most certainly remain complex. Mom may never fully admit the devastation she has caused. Camille's growth potential may be limited. Dad's attempts to make amends could not undo years of absence. However, I no longer required their validation or approval to feel whole. The terrified 21-year-old who drove away from her childhood home with nowhere to go had discovered not just safety, but also strength. She had realized that family is sometimes chosen rather than born, and that standing in your truth, no matter how difficult, results in genuine connection rather than a hollow performance of obligation. As I sat on my veranda with a cup of tea, watching the stars appear in the summer sky, I felt tremendous serenity. The voyage had not been easy, but it had taken me exactly where I needed to be. Home, in all senses of the word. My toxic father suspended me without pay to protect my incompetent brother's fragile ego, completely unaware that by locking me out of the company servers, he had legally terminated my contract. He had no idea that his petty punishment just triggered a constructive dismissal clause, allowing me to walk away with a $1.25 million buyout and the exclusive patent to the technology keeping his entire real estate empire from collapsing. Original post. I am Elias, 34 years old. For the better part of a decade, I poured my blood, sweat, and absolute soul into our family's multi-million-dollar real estate development firm in Seattle. And exactly 3 years ago, My own father suspended me from that very company, demanding that I apologize to my utterly incompetent older brother, Tristan. I was standing in the middle of our executive boardroom, desperately trying to save our entire company from a catastrophic breach of contract on a massive, high-stakes cliffside estate project. Instead of listening to reason, my father looked me dead in the eye in front of the board and told me I was suffocating the company with my negativity. They laughed at me. They stripped away my dignity right there in the executive suite, treating me not like the lead project director who kept their empire standing, but like a disposable mechanic who was speaking out of turn. But there was one massive, undeniable thing they didn't know. The revolutionary core technology they were relying on to build their massive wealth didn't belong to the company at all, it belonged exclusively to me. And right now, the very same men who told me to get out, who threatened to bury me in legal fees, are facing total financial ruin, practically begging me to save their hollow legacy from the ashes. Let's go back to the morning everything shattered. The morning the silence in the room changed my life forever. The conference room fell absolutely silent after my father delivered his verdict. It was a heavy, suffocating kind of silence, the kind that presses against your eardrums and makes your heart beat in your throat. The central air conditioning hummed faintly in the background, a low drone that seemed to mock the absolute stillness of the room through the massive floor-to-ceiling glass windows. The entire Seattle skyline stretched out, gray, towering, and imposing against the relentless Pacific Northwest rain. I had spent countless hours staring out at those very buildings, analyzing their structural integrity, admiring the sheer force of human will required to raise thousands of tons of steel and glass into the clouds. But in that agonizing moment, all I could focus on was the cold, hard surface of the mahogany table sitting directly in front of me. 2 weeks without pay for undermining your brother's authority. That was the official sentence my father, Richard, had just pronounced with the gavel of his voice. My brother, Tristan, sat directly across from me. He was wearing a ridiculously expensive tailored Tom Ford blazer that probably cost more than most of our junior architects made in 3 months of grueling work. He was smirking. It was a slow, arrogant, utterly venomous smirk that twisted the corners of his mouth upward. He sat back in his plush leather chair, steepling his perfectly manicured fingers, just waiting. He was waiting for me to break down. He was waiting for me to beg for my job, to plead for my salary to be reinstated, or perhaps to scream in red-faced frustration and prove them right about my supposed emotional instability. I didn't do either. I didn't raise my voice by a single decibel. I didn't shed a single tear. I just stood there breathing evenly, feeling a strange, absolute, and terrifying calm wash over every nerve in my body. I looked down at the blueprints scattered on the polished wood between us. They were massive, intricate, highly detailed designs detailing a $25 million sustainable cliffside estate for a Silicon Valley tech billionaire. They were designs I drew with my own 2 hands. I was the one who spent late nights calculating the complex load-bearing requirements, factoring in the unpredictable seismic activity of the region, and ensuring every single strict structural code was met to the letter. Yet, I wasn't credited for a single line on that paper. Tristan's name was proudly stamped in bold ink on the cover sheet as the visionary behind the project. In that exact second, staring at my stolen work, something inside me finally snapped. Or perhaps more accurately, it finally healed. I realized my loyalty had officially expired. The invisible, heavy chain that had bound me to this toxic family, the desperate, pathetic hope that one day my hard work would earn their genuine respect, dissolved into thin air. I looked at my father. He sat at the head of the table, his broad shoulders squared, radiating the kind of positional authority he had wielded like a weapon over me since I was a child. I looked at Tristan, still wearing that disgusting, triumphant smirk, and then I simply said, "All right." The silence that followed those 2 words was completely terrifying. It was terrifying because for the very first time in my entire life, they weren't looking at an obedient, desperate son. They were looking at an architect planning a massive, calculated demolition. My father's smug smile was permanently etched into his aging face. Fully convinced he had just put his rebellious dog back in its place, he wanted me to sit at home in my apartment for 2 weeks and think about my insolence. He wanted me to experience the sheer anxiety of a paused salary. He wanted me to come back, begging, utterly grateful for the meager paycheck he allowed me to have, ready to kiss his ring. He wanted to break my spirit so completely that I would never dare question Tristan's reckless, idiotic decisions again. He had absolutely no idea that he had just handed me the one thing I'd been waiting years for. He gave me the perfect exit strategy. He didn't know that the very next morning that arrogant smirk on Tristan's face would curdle into pure, unadulterated panic when he walked in with his morning espresso to find my office completely empty. He didn't know that there would be nothing left behind, but a single legally binding resignation letter resting dead center on my glass desk. And he certainly didn't know that when Marcus, the company lawyer, would run into this very room, his face pale as a sheet, gasping, my father's victorious smile would die on the spot. But to truly understand the sheer weight of that silence in the boardroom, to understand why I was more than willing to burn my own family's bridge to the ground without a second thought, You have to understand the decades of quiet humiliation that laid the thick foundation for it. You have to understand the toxic soil in which this family tree was planted. Growing up in our household meant learning early on that love was never unconditional. Love was a highly regulated commodity, a currency traded strictly for compliance, obedience, and optical perfection. If you were the golden child like my older brother Tristan, the bank of parental affection was always open, operating with an unlimited line of credit. Tristan was loud, charismatic, and completely allergic to actual hard work. He was the kind of person who could walk into a room, shake a few hands, flash $1 million smile, and somehow take credit for the building he was standing in. I remember the Thanksgiving dinners of our childhood. They felt more like corporate shareholder meetings than family gatherings. We would sit around a massive oak table, extended family gathered from across the state, passing plates of expensive catered food. My father, Richard, would stand up, clink his crystal glass, and boast loudly about Tristan's golf handicap, his shiny new sports car, or the promotion he was supposedly about to get. He would conveniently leave out the fact that Tristan's college fund had to be replenished 3 separate times after he failed out of various prestigious business programs because he was too busy partying. When the conversation inevitably turned to me, Richard would offer a tight, polite smile and say, "Elias is doing fine in the back office. He's a good mechanic for our little engines. Someone has to do the dirty work, right?" That was exactly how they saw me. I wasn't an innovator. I wasn't a leader. I was just the mechanic they kept locked in the basement to fix the engines they kept breaking with their sheer incompetence. My mother, Eleanor, was the master architect of this twisted, deeply sick dynamic. She had this soft, gentle voice that she used to deliver the most manipulative psychological commands imaginable. Whenever Tristan would take credit for my science fair projects in middle school, or later my architectural drafts at the firm, Eleanor would pull me aside into a quiet hallway. She would pat my cheek, look at me with wide, pleading eyes, and say, "Elias, you know your brother needs this win. He struggles with his confidence. You're so smart. You can always make another design. Don't be selfish and tear this family apart. We need to protect your father's legacy." When you hear that narrative constantly, year after year, decade after decade, you internalize it. You internalize the toxic idea that if you just work harder, if you just produce more undeniable value, if you just keep your head down and swallow your pride, eventually the ledger will balance. You believe that one day they will look at you, see your worth, and finally give you the respect you deserve. That is the trap. It is a prison built entirely of hope. You learn a very specific survival set. You learn that speaking up gets you cut off, yelled at, and isolated, but staying quiet keeps you in the room. You learn to make yourself so incredibly essential that they literally cannot afford to discard you. I thought I was earning my place in the family business, but really I was just increasing their profit margins while eroding my own soul. For 8 grueling years, my office at the firm had been my only real sanctuary. It was a beautiful, expansive space with floor-to-ceiling glass that overlooked the sprawling Seattle skyline. It was a view I had earned, not by blood or nepotism, but by thousands of agonizing billable hours and turning structural impossibilities into concrete reality. The walls of my office held my degrees, framed in simple black wood, hanging right alongside the major architectural awards the development division had won under my direct leadership. I had built something tangible here, not just buildings, but a standard of excellence, a level of meticulous quality that our firm had never once achieved before I walked through those doors. And the absolute crown jewel of all my work was sitting right there on my desk, catching the morning light, the Terralock modular system. It was a highly sustainable load-bearing system that I invented from scratch. It was nothing short of brilliant. The system cut overall construction time by 40% and increased a building's seismic resilience and thermal efficiency by half. It was a massive game changer for luxury real estate in the Pacific Northwest. My father loved Terralock because it saved him millions in raw materials and labor costs. Tristan loved it because, as the vice president of client relations, he could slap his name on the glossy brochures and sell it to wealthy clients as top-tier green tech luxury. But I loved it because I built it from nothing. I remember the agonizing nights I spent designing the joints, the weekends I sacrificed refining the complex geometry while my friends were out living their lives. The sheer physical exhaustion of proving it worked when veteran engineers in the industry laughed and said it wouldn't hold. My silence over the last 8 years wasn't mere submission. It was deliberate, cold-blooded data collection. I wasn't just enduring their daily abuse and taking the salary they threw at me. I was thoroughly documenting the infrastructure of the entire company. I was learning exactly where the load-bearing walls of their business were located. I was memorizing the codes to the metaphorical safe. And most importantly, I was quietly patenting the Terralock technology entirely in my own name under a separate legal entity called Elias Architectural LLC. I did this because deep down in my gut, I knew a day would inevitably come when my family would try to erase me completely. I knew they would try to push me out the moment I became too expensive or too vocal. I needed to be absolutely sure that when I finally walked out the door, I didn't just leave an empty chair. I needed to ensure that I took the very foundation of the company with me. The breaking point, the moment the timeline accelerated, arrived with a hurricane of pure, unadulterated arrogance. It all started 3 days before that fateful boardroom meeting when Tristan managed to close a massive deal with Arthur Vance, a highly influential tech mogul. Mr. Vance wanted a futuristic, sustainable estate built right on a prime piece of cliffside property overlooking the Puget Sound. It was a $25 million project. The commission alone on a deal that size was staggering. It would easily cover Tristan's lavish lifestyle, his country club memberships, and his impending divorce settlement for an entire year. But to secure the deal, to outbid our aggressive competitors who were circling like sharks, Tristan made a promise. A fatal, incredibly stupid promise. He looked a billionaire straight in the face and promised him the custom mansion would be completely move-in ready in 90 days. 90 days. Any freshman architecture student could tell you that was a physical impossibility. The foundational curing time for concrete in that specific climate zone was 28 days alone. The custom glazing required for the massive structural windows had a rigid 4-week lead time from the manufacturer in Germany. Securing the necessary seismic zoning approvals and city permits for a structure that close to a cliff edge would take at least 2 solid months. Tristan had sold an absolute fantasy to a billionaire who had a legal team vicious enough to destroy our entire company if we failed to deliver. When I saw the signed contract land on my desk, my blood ran cold. The timeline stipulated in the addendum was nothing short of corporate suicide. I didn't panic, though. I sat down, turned on my dual monitors, and did exactly what a professional project director does. I ran a rigorous, highly detailed critical path analysis. I looked at the soil composition reports, the global supply chain logistics, the HOA meeting schedules, and the labor union holiday blocks. I drafted a revised, highly comprehensive Gantt chart showing a realistic yet still incredibly aggressive timeline of 10 full months. I drafted a carefully worded email. I attached the revised schedule and sent it directly to Mr. Vance, making sure to copy my father and Tristan. I included a simple, highly professional note explaining that in order to ensure absolute structural integrity and strict code compliance, this was the required expedited schedule. It was completely factual. It was devoid of emotion. Most importantly, it was absolutely necessary to prevent a massive breach of contract lawsuit that would have bankrupted our entire firm. 10 minutes later, the illusion of family peace shattered into a million pieces. My office door flew open with such force it slammed against the wall stopper, leaving a dent in the drywall. Tristan stormed in, his face flushed a deep, ugly red. He was shaking with rage, screaming at the top of his lungs that I was deliberately trying to sabotage his career and ruin his reputation with high net worth clients. He didn't care about the laws of physics. He didn't care about the curing time of concrete or the brutal logistics of international supply chains. He only cared about the massive commission check that was now in jeopardy. He slammed both of his hands down on my desk, leaning over me, his designer silk tie dangling over my keyboard. "You always do this, Elias. You always try to make me look stupid. It's a house. Just build the damn house. Just pour the foundation and put up the walls." Before I could even respond to his absolute lack of industry knowledge, my father walked in right behind him. I looked at Richard, expecting the seasoned CEO of a major real estate firm to understand the severe legal liability we were facing. I expected him to look at the numbers, recognize the disaster Tristan had orchestrated, and back me up for the sake of the business. Instead, Richard crossed his arms, his face a mask of cold fury, and sided completely with his golden child. He looked down at me as if I were a stain on his expensive rug. He told me that sales and growth rely on vision, on pushing boundaries, and that my constant, miserable negativity was suffocating the company's potential. That was the exact moment I realized the horrible truth. They would gladly let the roof cave in on a family of 4 just to protect Tristan's fragile ego. Right in the middle of Richard's tirade, my phone buzzed on the desk. It was a text message from my mother, Eleanor. It read, "Elias, please stop embarrassing your brother in front of the staff. Fix the math for the client. We are family. Don't ruin this for us. Your father's blood pressure is high enough. Fix the math." As if I could negotiate a compromise with gravity. As if I could bribe the structural load of a steel beam to hold more weight just because my last name was identical to theirs. Then came the final verdict. Richard stood tall, puffing out his chest, using his physical size to try and intimidate me. He pointed a thick finger at my face and declared I was officially suspended. 2 weeks, no pay. My egregious crime, undermining the authority of the Vice President of Client Relations. I realized then that there is a tipping point in every survivor's life. A singular moment when you realize the immense debt of love and loyalty you've been trying to pay off will never actually be settled because the other side just keeps moving the decimal point. That realization doesn't break you, it clarifies you. It turns your vision crystal clear, stripping away all the emotional fog. "All right," I said quietly, my voice eerily calm. I didn't argue. I didn't defend my timeline. I just accepted it. Richard looked almost disappointed, his brow furrowing because I didn't grovel at his feet. He wanted a fight so he could crush me, but I gave him nothing. He turned on his heel and walked out, Tristan trailing right behind him like a victorious prince who had just won a war he didn't even fight. I sat alone in the quiet of my office. I reached for my computer mouse to save my complex architectural files and upload them to my secure personal drive. Suddenly, the screen flickered. The CAD software vanished in a blink. A harsh gray box popped up right in the center of the monitor. Access denied. Your credentials have been revoked by administrator. Richard had locked me out of the company servers before he even made it back down the hallway to his own corner office. He thought he was asserting his absolute dominance. He thought he was cutting off my access to punish me, to remind me who held the keys to the kingdom. He had absolutely no clue that he was locking himself inside a burning building. The war had officially started, and they didn't even know I had the nuclear codes in my pocket. I stood up from my desk, walked over to the deep supply closet in the corner, pulled out a large, heavy-duty cardboard box, and began to pack. I moved with surgical, completely emotionless precision. The framed degrees came down off the walls first, then the shiny architectural awards. I wrapped them in bubble wrap with the cold, calculated efficiency of an archivist, preserving critical evidence for a massive trial. Every item I placed in that box was a piece of my identity that I was actively reclaiming from them. A few minutes later, there was a timid knock at the door. My assistant, Maya, poked her head in. She was a brilliant, dedicated young woman who actually understood the immense pressure I was under every single day. The rumor mill in a corporate real estate firm moves significantly faster than fiber optics, and she had clearly heard the vicious shouting. She hovered anxiously in the doorway, clutching a yellow legal pad to her chest like a shield. She asked if I was okay. She asked, her voice trembling slightly, if I was really leaving for 2 whole weeks. I stopped packing for a second. I looked at her, offering a small, reassuring smile. I told her to pack up her things and take the rest of the day off. I didn't tell her the truth. I didn't tell her I wasn't coming back in 2 weeks. I didn't tell her I wasn't coming back ever. Once she left, I turned back to my desk. I reached out and gently picked up the heavy metal prototype of the Terralock system. As I placed it into the cardboard box, my hand paused for a fraction of a second. This piece of steel was the structural core of every single luxury home we were currently building. It was the literal backbone of my father's current wealth. I wrapped it carefully and set it at the very bottom of the box. I was taping the last box shut when I felt a dark presence in the doorway. It was Tristan. The overwhelming, cloying scent of his designer cologne filled the room. He walked in casually, acting like he owned the entire building. He looked down at my neatly taped boxes and smirked, a look of pure, unadulterated condescension. He leaned his shoulder against the glass wall, crossing his arms, and told me that maybe this time off would actually be good for my mental health. Then he did something incredibly, astonishingly foolish. He reached over to my desk and picked up the massive set of blueprints for the tech mogul's $25 million estate. The ones I had painstakingly drawn. The ones he couldn't even begin to comprehend. He held them up in the air like a hard-won trophy. He proudly announced, puffing his chest out, that he was going to personally take over the project management himself. He laughed, a short barking sound, and said it couldn't possibly be that hard to tell a bunch of dirty contractors what to do. I stopped. I stared at him. For one brief, fleeting second, the dutiful brother in me almost warned him. I almost told him that the specific soil composition on that cliffside property required a highly specialized pile driving depth, and if he messed it up, the entire massive structure would literally slide into the freezing water of the Puget Sound. I almost told him that our primary steel suppliers required a massive 40% cash deposit by this coming Friday or we would lose our production slot, delaying the entire project by 6 months and triggering a catastrophic penalty clause. But I didn't say a single word. I just looked at him standing there looking so incredibly arrogant while holding my complex architectural plans completely upside down. I picked up my heavy cardboard box. I walked past him without breaking eye contact, leaving him standing alone in the quiet office. That night, sitting in the dim light of my downtown apartment, I didn't sleep. I poured a cup of black coffee, opened my personal laptop, and pulled up my employment contract. I meticulously reviewed every single page, specifically focusing on Clause 19, subsection C regarding constructive dismissal, and Clause 24 regarding intellectual property licensing. I sent a highly secure email to my outside legal counsel to confirm my strategy. The trap was perfectly set. The severance math was calculated down to the penny. Update 1. The next morning, I woke up long before my alarm clock even had a chance to go off. I didn't feel the usual heavy, suffocating knot of dread in my stomach. Instead, my mind was incredibly sharp, crystal clear, and completely focused. I walked into my bedroom closet and bypassed the standard everyday suits I usually wore. I reached to the very back and pulled out a bespoke navy blue suit. It was a suit I had bought years ago with my very first major project bonus, but rarely wore because Richard always made subtle passive-aggressive comments if I looked sharper than his golden child. Today, I didn't care about their fragile egos. I tied a dark silk tie, adjusted my heavy silver cufflinks, and looked at myself in the full-length mirror. I didn't look like the quiet, submissive project director they were so used to kicking around. I looked like a man who was about to foreclose on their entire fabricated reality. I drove to the office at exactly 9 a.m. sharp. I didn't take my usual designated spot in the subterranean employee parking garage. I drove right up to the front of the massive glass building and parked my car squarely in the prime visitor section. The morning air was crisp and biting. I walked through the heavy glass revolving doors carrying absolutely nothing but a thin black leather portfolio. Inside it were the exact legal documents that were going to change my life forever. The main lobby was bustling with the usual morning rush. The senior receptionist, Helen, looked up from her switchboard. Her warm, welcoming smile immediately faltered, replaced by a look of deep, uncomfortable confusion. She knew I had been officially suspended. "Elias?" Helen asked, her voice hushed and nervous. Are you supposed to be here today? Your father sent down a memo. He said your access was revoked." "I just have a quick meeting, Helen," I said gently, offering her a warm, reassuring smile. "It won't take long." "You don't need to page them." I walked straight down the long, plushly carpeted hallway toward the main executive boardroom. Through the expensive frosted glass walls, I could clearly see the blurry moving outlines of the people sitting inside. I didn't hesitate. I reached out, grabbed the heavy brass handle, and pushed the thick oak door open without knocking. The room was already in full session. Richard was sitting comfortably at the head of the massive mahogany table, sipping casually from a delicate porcelain coffee cup. Tristan was lounging in the expensive ergonomic chair right next to him, scrolling mindlessly through his phone. Sitting at the far end of the long table was Marcus, our senior corporate counsel. Marcus was a meticulous, weary-looking lawyer in his late 50s who always looked like he needed a vacation. He was a genuinely good man, extremely observant, and most importantly, the only person in this entire building besides me who actually took the time to read the fine print of our massive contracts. When the heavy door clicked shut behind me, the sound echoed loudly in the quiet space, and all three heads snapped up simultaneously. Richard set his coffee cup down on its saucer with a sharp, aggressive clink. "What in the world are you doing here, Elias?" Richard demanded, his booming voice echoing off the glass walls. "I made myself extremely clear yesterday afternoon. You are officially suspended. You are not allowed on these premises." "Yeah." Tristan let out a loud, obnoxious snort. "Did you come crawling back to apologize already? Because if you did, you need to make it quick. We have a massive strategy meeting for the new Cliffside estate in 10 minutes, and some of us actually have real important work to do." I didn't react to the bait. I walked slowly and deliberately toward the center of the table. I stood tall, placing my black leather portfolio gently onto the polished glass surface of the table. The soft thud commanded the entire room's attention. "I am not here to apologize to anyone, Richard," I said. My voice was perfectly level. "I am here to formally resign." Richard's eyes narrowed dangerously. Tristan finally put his phone face down on the table, a confused, ugly frown wrinkling his forehead. I reached down, unzipped the leather portfolio, pulled out a single sheet of premium watermarked legal paper, and slid it smoothly across the long table. But I didn't slide it toward Richard or Tristan. I slid it all the way down to Marcus the lawyer. "Effective immediately, as of 9/5 this morning, I am formally terminating my employment with this firm," I announced, keeping my eyes completely locked on Marcus's face. "Furthermore, per Clause 19, subsection C of my signed executive employment agreement, I am officially triggering the constructive dismissal provision." For a split second, the room was dead, suffocatingly silent, and then Richard threw his head back and laughed loudly. It was a harsh, barking, theatrical laugh. "Constructive dismissal? Mad." Richard sneered, shaking his head and looking at Tristan as if sharing a joke. "Are you completely delusional, Elias? You weren't fired. You were suspended for gross insubordination. You don't just get to quit your job and claim constructive dismissal because your fragile feelings are hurt. You don't get a magical golden parachute just because you're throwing a tantrum." I ignored Richard completely. I kept my gaze fixed entirely on Marcus, who was now staring down at the formal letter, his hands trembling slightly as he picked it up to read the text. "Marcus," I said, my voice cutting cleanly through Richard's lingering laughter like a sharp knife, "please remind the CEO of the strict legal definition outlined in my specific employment contract. I personally drafted that exact clause 5 years ago back when Richard was going through his extremely messy second divorce and the company's financial stability was wildly unpredictable." Marcus swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing nervously. He adjusted his wire-rimmed glasses. He didn't look up at Richard. He kept his eyes glued to the paper. "Under the explicit terms of the contract," I continued, reciting the exact legal words I had memorized perfectly the night before, locking a senior project director out of the main company server, completely removing their access to active architectural blueprints, and publicly demoting them in front of staff without a formal performance review or written warning constitutes a material breach of contract. By revoking my digital credentials yesterday while I was still physically inside the building, Richard legally dismissed me without cause. Richard stopped laughing instantly. His face rapidly shifted from an arrogant, dismissive, pale to a mottled, highly dangerous shade of red. He slammed his large, heavy hand down on the mahogany table, violently rattling the coffee cups and saucers. "You are completely out of your mind," Richard shouted, the veins popping in his thick neck. "I won't pay you a single dime. I will tie you up in civil court for the next decade. I will bury you in so many legal fees until you are literally begging for a minimum wage job." "The standard penalty for constructive dismissal," I said smoothly, talking right over his aggressive screaming, maintaining perfect eye contact with the lawyer, "is an immediate, non-negotiable buyout of my accumulated equity stake in the firm." I had an independent auditor run the exact math based on our last official quarterly valuation. The company currently owes me exactly $1,250,000. And per the contract which you personally signed and notarized, Richard, it is payable in full within 30 days. Tristan jumped up abruptly out of his expensive chair. His face contorted in sheer, unadulterated rage. "You greedy, pathetic loser. You're trying to bankrupt your own family. You're just jealous because I actually closed the big deal with the tech mogul and you didn't." I looked slowly over at my brother. For the very first time in 34 long years, I didn't feel the familiar crushing sting of inadequacy. I just felt an overwhelming, profound sense of deep pity. He was fighting so desperately for a tin crown in a crumbling, dying kingdom. "You can have the deal, Tristan," I said softly. "You can have the vice president title. You can have the massive corner office with the beautiful view of the water. You can have all the public credit you so desperately crave. Note, but you absolutely cannot have my equity. It belongs to me." Richard stood up now, looming aggressively over the table. "Get out of my building," he snarled, pointing a shaking, angry finger directly at the door. "If you want a war, Elias, you've got one. Get out." I smiled. It wasn't a nice, friendly smile. It was a cold, completely hollow expression. It was the smile of a man who has meticulously wired the dynamite to the foundation and is simply standing back calmly watching the fuse burn down to the final millimeter. "The money is just the beginning, Richard," I said, my voice dropping to a low whisper that somehow commanded total silence in the large room. "There is one more thing we need to discuss before I leave. One more crucial clause in that contract that you obviously didn't bother to read." The entire atmosphere in the boardroom shifted dramatically, almost violently. The aggressive screaming energy that Richard and Tristan had been throwing at me suddenly hit a massive invisible wall. For the first time in my entire life, a flicker of genuine deep-seated doubt crossed my father's arrogant face. He slowly lowered his pointing finger. I turned my attention back to the far end of the table where the company lawyer was still staring at my resignation letter. "Marcus," I said calmly, my voice steady and measured, "please turn to page 14 of the employment addendum I provided in that packet. The specific detailed section regarding intellectual property and corporate licensing." Marcus, who was already sweating profusely, frantically flipped through the thick stack of legal papers securely attached to my resignation letter. The sound of the rustling paper was incredibly, deafeningly loud in the suddenly quiet room. I watched his tired eyes scan the dense, complicated legal text. I watched as his pupils visibly dilated in real time. I watched as the blood completely drained from his face, leaving him looking exactly like a man who had just been diagnosed with a terminal illness. Marcus looked up slowly at Richard. His lower lip was literally trembling. "Richard," Marcus whispered, his voice cracking painfully. He's right. The Terralock modular system, the core patent for the technology. It isn't legally held by the firm." Tristan scoffed loudly, rolling his eyes dramatically and crossing his arms. "What in the world are you talking about, Marcus? Of course it is. We sell it every single day. It is plastered in all our marketing brochures. Stop being ridiculous." "The patent," Marcus said, completely ignoring Tristan and staring in pure horror at Richard, "is legally registered to and completely held by an independent separate entity. Elias Architectural LLC. Marcus wiped his sweating forehead with a trembling hand. "The company doesn't own the technology. We never did." Richard's jaw physically dropped. He looked like he had been struck hard across the face. He turned to me, his eyes wide with a chaotic mix of betrayal, rage, and sheer disbelief. "So what?" Richard spat, spit actually flying from his lips, desperately trying to cling to his rapidly crumbling authority. "You work for me. I pay your salary. Everything you design under this roof belongs to the company. It's called intellectual property, you idiot, and we own it. Not according to the explicit, legally binding terms of the addendum we executed 5 years ago," I replied, my voice cool, steady, and utterly victorious. Clause 24 states very clearly that the firm only holds a revocable license to utilize the Terralock intellectual property, And that license is strictly and entirely contingent upon my continued active employment as the senior project director of this firm. I leaned forward slowly, placing both of my hands flat on the cold mahogany table, bringing myself closer to Richard. I wanted him to hear every single syllable clearly. In the event of termination without cause, or in this specific legal case, constructive dismissal, I said, pausing for deliberate effect, watching his eyes widen, the license to use that technology is automatically revoked. Effective immediately as of 9/5 this morning. I let those words hang heavily in the air. I let the absolute crushing gravity of the situation completely suck the oxygen out of the room. Do you understand what that means, Richard? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper, yet echoing loudly in their ears. That means you legally cannot pour the foundation for Mr. Vance's $25 million cliffside estate today. You cannot finish the 3 massive luxury estates currently sitting half-built in Bellevue. You cannot order the custom steel from our suppliers. You cannot even distribute the glossy marketing materials that Tristan handed out yesterday because they feature my patented, highly protected designs. Tristan looked frantically back and forth between me and Marcus. Sheer panic finally breaking through his arrogant, unearned facade. Wait, what is he saying, Marcus? What does that mean for my contract? What does that mean for my commission? I need that money for my upcoming divorce settlement. You can't do this. If you use my technology, I continued, completely ignoring my brother's pathetic whining, staring directly into my father's terrified eyes, I will immediately sue you for massive patent infringement in federal court. And with Marcus sitting right here as my witness to this conversation, I will win. I will take every single asset this company possesses. You are currently sitting on a massive pile of signed contracts you absolutely cannot legally fulfill, selling a premium product you no longer own. The silence in the room was absolute. It wasn't just quiet, it was a total vacuum. It was the horrifying sound of a multi-million-dollar empire collapsing in real time, brick by brick. I watched the last remnants of color drain completely from Richard's aging face. The powerful, domineering CEO who had controlled my life through deep fear and financial manipulation was suddenly gone, replaced by a terrified old man facing total, irreversible financial ruin. He looked slowly over at Tristan, his beloved golden child, desperately hoping his vice president of client relations would somehow have a miraculous visionary solution to save them. But Tristan was utterly useless. He was just staring at me, his mouth hanging slightly open, looking exactly like a spoiled child who had just shattered a priceless vase he couldn't possibly afford to replace. He had no vision. He had no technical knowledge. He had absolutely nothing to offer when the real work was required. I will be expecting the buyout check for $1,250,000 wired directly to my account within 30 days, I said smoothly, picking up my leather portfolio and zipping it closed with a sharp final sound. I turned away from the table and began walking toward the heavy glass door. I stopped just before I grabbed the brass handle and looked back over my shoulder at the terrified company lawyer. And Marcus, I advised, my tone dripping with cold professional courtesy, I highly recommend you start drafting the formal cease and desist letters to all our active contractors immediately. You really don't want Richard to be held personally liable for unauthorized illegal construction on top of a massive breach of contract lawsuit. It would completely wipe out whatever is left of his retirement. I walked out of the boardroom. I didn't storm out. I didn't yell. I didn't slam the heavy oak door behind me to make a dramatic point. I closed it gently with a soft, definitive click that sounded exactly like the final tumblers of a heavy bank vault lock falling perfectly into place, sealing them inside their own disaster. Update 2. 3 months later, my life looked entirely, beautifully different. The suffocating, toxic silence of that corporate boardroom had been replaced by a new, wonderful kind of silence. The silence in my brand new, fully independent architectural studio was broken only by the soft, rhythmic scratch of my drafting pencil against high-quality paper. I had signed a long-term lease on a beautiful, expansive converted loft space in Pioneer Square. It had gorgeous exposed brick walls, incredibly high industrial ceilings, and massive windows that flooded the entire workspace with bright natural light. Best of all, the air inside was completely free of toxic family politics, gaslighting, and emotional manipulation. I had used a sizable portion of my equity buyout money to completely set up shop. Marcus, absolutely terrified of the severe legal repercussions I had clearly outlined during that meeting, had personally ensured the funds were wired directly to my bank account exactly 29 days after my dramatic resignation. I wasn't just surviving on my own. For the first time in my entire life, I was absolutely thriving. I was taking meetings with clients who actually respected my input, who valued my engineering background, and who paid their invoices on time. But across town, in the sterile corporate offices of my family's firm, the mighty empire I had left behind was actively burning to the ground. The total collapse of the company wasn't a quick, spectacular explosion. It was a slow, agonizing, profoundly humiliating grind that played out over several brutal weeks. It started exactly where I knew it would, with the immediate, legally binding cease and desist orders I had my new legal counsel enforce on all their job sites. Mr. Vance, the powerful tech mogul, was absolutely furious when he was officially informed that construction on his dream cliffside home had been abruptly halted before the first steel beam was even raised. When Richard couldn't provide a valid, acceptable legal reason for the massive delay, Vance didn't hesitate for a second. He immediately sued the firm for a massive breach of contract. That highly publicized, aggressive lawsuit instantly triggered a catastrophic penalty clause in the company's corporate insurance policy, raising their monthly liability premiums by a staggering 200%. Then came the absolute logistical nightmare. With their backs against the wall and the bank calling daily, Tristan desperately tried to step up. In a blind panic, hoping to save his shrinking salary and his reputation, he went behind Richard's back and quietly hired a junior architect named Leo. Leo was a kid fresh out of grad school, highly ambitious, but incredibly naive to the realities of complex structural engineering. Tristan offered him a massive cash bonus to secretly tweak my Terralock designs just enough to theoretically bypass my strict patent protections. But there is a fundamental undeniable truth in this world. You can manipulate people, you can manipulate emotions, and you can manipulate a family narrative, but you absolutely cannot manipulate physics. Without the precise patented geometric core of my modular system, the complex load-bearing calculations simply didn't work. Leo spent 3 agonizing weeks running computer simulations, pulling his hair out, only to realize the structural integrity was fatally compromised. The junior architect finally had to sit Tristan down in a tense meeting and explain that they needed to completely abandon the sustainable marketing pitch and switch back to traditional heavy steel I-beams. This sudden drastic pivot would immediately double the raw material cost of the project and triple the overall construction timeline. When Leo delivered the bad news, Tristan absolutely lost his mind. He screamed at the poor kid. He threw coffee mugs against the wall. He demanded that Leo just make it work, completely ignoring the laws of gravity. Tristan genuinely believed that possessing a fancy title meant you could simply command results into existence. He didn't understand the fundamental illusion of power via the empty chair. For years, Tristan had sat comfortably in executive meetings, nodded charmingly at wealthy clients, and confidently signed his name to incredibly complex documents he didn't understand, firmly believing that this performance was the actual work. What I had always possessed, what I had spent thousands of hours building, was competence, authority, power derived from intimately knowing exactly how the machine works from the inside out. I heard all the juicy, devastating details through the industry grapevine. Desperate contractors, men who had known me for years and trusted my blueprints, called me directly, begging for any freelance work because Richard was aggressively bleeding cash. He was paying astronomical daily delay penalties on 3 different stalled construction sites across the city, dealing with furious HOA boards. He had fired Leo in a massive fit of rage. Worse, credible rumors were swirling that Richard was quietly taking closed-door meetings with high-profile bankruptcy lawyers just to figure out how to shield his personal real estate portfolio and his retirement accounts from the impending implosion. The family name, once completely synonymous with luxury and architectural innovation in Seattle, was now a massive, glaring warning label for stalled projects, unpaid invoices, and endless litigation. I was at my desk working on a beautiful commission for a local community center when my cell phone buzzed loudly on the wooden desk. The caller ID flashed brightly on the screen. Richard. It was the 5th time he had called me this week. I didn't answer. I just watched the screen glow, letting it ring out into the quiet room. I was deliberately letting him sit in the agonizing, suffocating silence that he had personally created. I was letting him feel the crushing, undeniable weight of the empty chair. He finally showed up in person on a dreary Tuesday morning. It was raining, a cold, gray, miserable Seattle drizzle that heavily streaked the large glass windows of my Pioneer Square studio, casting long shadows across the floor. I was at my desk when I saw his car pull up to the curb. It wasn't the flagship chauffeur-driven Mercedes S-Class he used to pride himself on. It was a modest, slightly older midsize sedan. He stepped out into the freezing rain without an umbrella and walked slowly toward the front door. His steps were slow and incredibly heavy. He looked 10 years older than the last time I saw him screaming in that boardroom. The rigid, overbearing arrogance that used to hold his spine perfectly straight had completely evaporated, leaving behind a hollowed-out, exhausted man who looked like he was wearing a suit 2 sizes too big for his rapidly shrinking frame. I pressed the intercom buzzer to unlock the front door. I didn't get up to greet him. I didn't offer to take his wet, dripping coat. I simply sat behind my drafting desk, my hands calmly folded on top of a fresh, clean set of blueprints. Richard stood dripping in the middle of the room, looking around at the space I had built without him. He took in the exposed brick, the modern warm lighting, the quiet, steady hum of an independent business that was fully solvent and completely at peace. Tristan is out, Richard said. No preamble, no fake pleasantries. I fired him this morning, Richard continued, his voice raspy and devoid of emotion. He's packing his bags right now. He's moving to Arizona to stay with your mother's sister. The divorce wiped him out completely. I nodded slowly, my expression completely neutral, offering no sympathy. That seems prudent, I replied softly. The tech mogul settled out of court, Richard stated, staring at the floorboards, unable to meet my eyes. It cost the company $4 million in immediate penalties. We had to drastically liquidate assets. We sold the family lake house just to cover the immediate liquidity gap and keep the lights on. He paused, clearly waiting for me to wince. He was waiting for me to show some sign of familial grief over the loss of our childhood vacation home, the place where we spent our summers. I didn't give him an inch. I just kept looking at him, my face a mask of polite indifference. We absolutely cannot finish the Bellevue luxury estates without the Terra Lock license, Richard admitted, the defeat heavy and obvious in his chest. The prime contractors are threatening to walk off the job by Friday and sue us for lost wages. The bank is calling my personal cell phone daily. We are drowning, Elias, the whole thing is going under. He took a slow, hesitant step closer to my desk, leaning his trembling hands on the back of the guest chair, but he didn't dare sit down. He looked broken. I'm here to make you an official offer, Elias, Richard said, finally looking up, a desperate final plea in his tired eyes. Come back. Not as the project director. Not as an employee. As the CEO, I will step down to chairman immediately. You take full uncontested operational control of the entire firm. You get 51% of the voting stock. It's yours. The whole kingdom, everything I built. I sat completely still. This was it. This was the exact offer I had spent my entire 20s desperately dreaming of. This was the ultimate validation I had scraped, clawed, and sacrificed my mental health for. My powerful, overbearing father was literally handing me the keys to the entire empire, publicly admitting that I was the only person capable of ruling it. He was trying to sell me my own rightful inheritance, acknowledging that I was the superior son. And the catch? I asked, my voice flat, completely devoid of any excitement or triumph. You relicense the intellectual property back to the company, Richard said eagerly, sensing an opening, his voice rising with a desperate hope. We finish the stalled projects. We use your brilliance to rebuild the reputation. The legacy, Elias, it belongs to you. We can fix this together. I looked at him. I really, truly looked at him. And for the very first time in my life, I didn't see a terrifying titan of industry. I didn't see the invincible patriarch who controlled my destiny. I saw a beggar king standing ankle deep in the smoking ruins of a castle he had set on fire with his own two hands, desperately trying to trade a worthless crown of ashes for a fire extinguisher. No, I said simply. Richard blinked, momentarily stunned, as if I had spoken a foreign language. Excuse me? The answer is no, Richard. I don't want the job. I don't want the stock. And I certainly do not want the legacy. You're being incredibly stubborn. He snapped, a sudden, desperate flash of the old, angry Richard breaking through the pathetic facade. I'm offering you absolutely everything you ever wanted. I'm standing here admitting you were right. Tristan couldn't handle it. I was wrong. You won, Elias. Take the win. I didn't win, I corrected him softly, leaning forward, resting my forearms on the desk. I escaped. There is a massive difference. I stood up and walked over to the large window, looking out at the bustling city street below. You think you're generously offering me an empire, Richard, but you're actually offering me a toxic Superfund site. The company is completely poisoned. The brand is fatally damaged in the industry, and the internal culture is rotting from the inside out. If I came back, I wouldn't be building anything beautiful. I would be spending the next 10 years of my life miserably cleaning up your mess. I turned back to face him, crossing my arms. But that's not even the real reason I'm saying no. The real reason is that I finally understand the actual cost of that legacy. This was the absolute moment of final severance. I looked him dead in the eye and delivered the harsh, undeniable truth I had been carrying heavily in my chest since the day I packed my cardboard box. There is a persistent, dangerous myth we tell ourselves about family, I said quietly. We tell ourselves that blood is a binding sacred contract, that we owe our parents our infinite survival and loyalty because they gave us life. But that is a lie. You didn't raise me, Richard. You managed me. You treated my affection and my talent like a renewable resource you could exploit for maximum profit. You constantly demanded absolute loyalty, but you only ever offered conditional employment. I am your father, he whispered, the words sounding hollow, pathetic, and completely meaningless in the open space of my studio. And I am a distinct legal entity, I replied, my voice hard as steel. Cutting the bloodline today isn't an act of malice. It is an act of pure self-preservation. It is the only way to save my actual self from being cannibalized by your system. If I accept your offer and come back, I am forced to accept the premise that my core worth is forever tied to your approval. I reject that premise entirely. I am not saving your name. I am saving Elias. He stared at me for a very long time. The silence stretched between us, heavy and incredibly final. He realized in that exact moment that he possessed absolutely zero leverage. He couldn't fire me. He couldn't legally disown me of what I had already built. He couldn't even guilt-trip me because I had perfectly balanced the emotional ledger and permanently closed the account. "What will you do?" he asked finally, his voice barely a whisper. "With the patents, I'll license them," I said with a faint, genuine smile. "To other architecture firms, to our competitors, to builders who actually pay their invoices on time and respect their engineers." As a matter of fact, I'm meeting with Mr. Vance next week to discuss finishing his home myself. The Terralock modular system will eventually build thousands of beautiful homes, Richard, just not yours. He nodded slowly. He didn't argue. He didn't yell. He didn't even say goodbye. He simply turned around and walked out of the studio into the freezing rain. His shoulders were severely slumped. He was a broken man walking blindly into a future he hadn't ever planned for. I watched him go through the glass. I didn't feel sad. I didn't feel overly triumphant. I just felt clear. I turned back to my drafting desk. The blueprints for the community center were waiting for me. It was a project that would genuinely serve a community, built on a solid foundation that I had poured myself. I picked up my pencil. The line was perfectly straight. The structure was undeniably sound. And for the very first time in my entire life, the design was entirely, undeniably mine. My brother said, "Talk to our attorney." He believed his wife and let her frame me for child abuse. I didn't break, I fought back. Now she's in jail. On a Friday afternoon, the process server delivered me the paperwork as I was loading groceries into my car outside Whole Foods. Her name appeared on official court records. Vanessa Whitmore versus Lauren Hartley, with my 6-year-old niece Lily, named as the minor child in a complaint seeking $2.8 million in damages for negligence, child endangerment, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. I read the complaint again, standing in the parking lot with my frozen veggies thawing in the summer heat, unable to grasp what I was witnessing. According to the lawsuit, I permitted Lily to receive significant injuries during a weekend visit 10 weeks ago, neglected to seek adequate medical assistance, jeopardized her bodily and mental well-being, and created long-term trauma that required intensive therapy and medical intervention. The claims were detailed and horrific. They were also entirely contrived. I babysat Lily for a long weekend in May when my brother Ethan and his wife Vanessa went to a medical conference in Chicago. Lily had been completely well when they brought her up on Sunday evening. We had spent the weekend making cookies, watching cartoon movies, and playing in my backyard. She had left my home happy and healthy. Vanessa was now saying that I had nearly murdered her kid, and the papers connected to the complaint indicated that she had proof to back it up. I'd been a pediatric nurse for 9 years, specializing in emergency care at Children's Hospital in downtown. My whole career was spent safeguarding children, treating injuries, and fighting for their safety. The notion of endangering my own niece seemed preposterous. Ethan and I had always been close, calling many times a week and spending vacations together. When he married Vanessa 4 years ago, I happily welcomed her into our family. She was a professional and ambitious pharmaceutical sales representative who exuded real friendliness at family gatherings. Lily was born 3 years into their marriage, a lovely little girl with Ethan's black locks and Vanessa's green eyes. I had been at the hospital when Lily was born, and I was one of the first to hold her. Since then I've been babysitting on a regular basis, developing a particular and crucial bond with my niece. When Ethan phoned in early May to ask if I could keep Lily for the weekend while he and Vanessa went to a conference, I accepted without hesitation. Vanessa was at a pharmaceutical business event where she was honored for her sales performance. Ethan, who worked as a hospital administrator, accompanied her. They'd be gone from Friday evening until Sunday afternoon, less than 54 hours. Lily was looking forward to the sleepover, so she packed her favorite stuffed animals and princess clothes. Everything appeared typical on Friday evening, when they dropped Lily off. Vanessa provided me extensive information about nighttime habits, eating preferences, and emergency contacts. She appeared tight, but I ascribed it to job stress and trip anxiety. Ethan hugged Lily goodbye and thanked me for babysitting her. They departed at 5:30 p.m., and Lily and I had pizza for dinner. We played board games, she watched Frozen for the presumably 50th time in her young life, and she went to bed at 9 without incident. On Saturday morning, we used cookie cutters to make animal-shaped pancakes. We spent the afternoon in my backyard, where Lily played on the swing set while I weeded the vegetable beds. She scratched her knee slightly as she stumbled while hurrying to the home for a food. I cleansed the little abrasion with soap and water before placing a bandage. She wept for around 45 seconds before becoming distracted by the thought of ice cream. That evening we made chocolate chip cookies and frosted them with icing. Lily got icing in her hair, and we giggled as I helped her wash it out in the water. On Sunday morning, We headed to the downtown farmer's market, where Lily chose fresh strawberries and persuaded me to purchase her a flower crown. We came home for lunch and she played with dolls in my living room while I made grilled cheese sandwiches. When Ethan and Vanessa arrived Sunday at 3:30 p.m., Lily ran over to hug them, excitedly discussing our weekend excursions. Vanessa was busy, checking her phone constantly while Ethan placed Lily's items into their car. I described the slight knee scratch from Saturday and showed Vanessa the modest bandage. She hardly glanced at it, stating that scratches are common among children. They thanked me and departed. I felt happy about the weekend since I thought we had fun, and everything went well. Over the next several weeks I observed Ethan becoming less receptive to my messages and calls. When I offered lunch the next weekend he stated they were busy. When I inquired about getting together for Mother's Day because our mother was visiting from Florida, he stated that they had other arrangements. I was wounded by the remoteness, but imagined they were struggling with job or marriage problems. Vanessa was putting up a case against me, which surprised me. The lawsuit filings revealed a different story from what I had experienced. Vanessa's allegation said that Lily returned from my care with many bruises on her arms and legs, indicating probable physical abuse. The knee scratch I mentioned was described as a significant laceration that required medical treatment, which I had negligently neglected to deliver. Vanessa said Lily had acquired severe anxiety as a result of the weekend, displaying trauma symptoms such as nightmares, bedwetting, and a dread of being alone with adults. According to the medical papers attached to the complaint, Lily was sent to her physician 4 days after the weekend visit due to documented bruises and behavioral problems. According to a child psychologist's assessment, Lily endured a traumatic occurrence over the weekend that necessitated continuous therapy. Lily was photographed with visible bruises on her upper arms, thighs, and back. I gazed at these photographs, completely perplexed, unable to grasp what I was seeing. Lily had been okay when she left my home. I would have seen the bruises, and more significantly, I had not done anything to produce such damage. I contacted Ethan right after reading the complaint, my hands trembling as I dialed his number. On the third ring, he responded with a flat and icy voice that I had never heard before. I inquired what was going on, why Vanessa was suing me when Lily had been okay during our weekend together. Ethan refused to address anything, and insisted that all communication go via their attorney. I attempted to explain that this was absurd, that I loved Lily and would never hurt her, and that there was something seriously wrong with the whole situation. Ethan stated the evidence spoke for itself before hanging up. I stood in my kitchen, feeling punched in the gut, trying to understand how my brother could believe I had hurt his kid. We had been close our entire lives. He'd attended my nursing school graduation, helped me move into my first apartment, and supported me through my divorce 4 years ago. Now he was supporting his wife in a lawsuit accusing me of child abuse. The treachery was stunning, and the consequences were professionally catastrophic. If these claims were made public at my hospital, my nursing career may be over. Accusations of child endangerment, even if baseless, ended careers in pediatric medicine. Monday morning, I phoned an attorney, Brooke Callahan, who was recommended by a coworker. Brooke specialized in family law and defamation disputes, having over 20 years of expertise defending professionals against false claims. Her workplace was downtown, in a building facing the river, and we met that afternoon. I produced the lawsuit paperwork and outlined the entire case, including a detailed account of the weekend with Lily. Brooke listened closely, taking notes and asking detailed questions regarding the chronology of events, what I'd noticed about Lily's physical state, and my subsequent encounters with Ethan and Vanessa. Brooke checked the accompanying medical documents and images after I was finished. She scowled and studied the photographs intently. "These bruises are extensive," she explained. "If Lily had this level of bruising when she left your care, you would have noticed." I emphasized that Lily was perfectly fine when her parents picked her up, with no bruising or discomfort. Brooke inquired whether I had any documentation from the weekend, such as photographs or videos. I took out my phone and showed her images from Saturday's farmer's market and Sunday morning's cookie baking session. Lily seemed cheerful and healthy in all of the photos, with no noticeable bruises on her exposed arms and legs. Brooke's expression became sharper. "This is vital. These photographs show Lily without any bruises, less than 18 hours before her parents brought her up. That timing does not match the medical documents Vanessa supplied." Brooke said that we needed to construct a detailed defense proving the claims were incorrect, and possibly investigating why Vanessa would fake such severe accusations. She inquired about my connection with Ethan and Vanessa, and whether there had been any disagreements or tensions prior to the lawsuit. I remarked that Vanessa had always seemed controlling, especially in terms of how Ethan spent his time and money, but I ascribed this to her personality rather than anything nefarious. Brooke inquired whether Ethan and Vanessa had any financial or marital concerns that I was aware of. I said that Ethan had indicated a few months ago that Vanessa's sales commissions had reduced owing to changes in her company's incentive system and they'd had to cut some costs. Brooke made some notes. Financial hardship might lead to fraudulent claims, especially if there is insurance or compensation available. She inquired whether I had home's insurance or professional liability coverage. I confirmed that I possessed both, but with considerable regulatory constraints due to my nursing career. Brooke nodded grimly. That's probably what Vanessa is after. She isn't only attempting to hurt you. She's attempting to obtain your insurance money through a bogus claim. The discovery made me feel ill. My sister-in-law was determined to harm my name and profession in order to profit from my insurance policies, and she was using my brother and niece to accomplish this. Brooke sought a $12,500 fee to start preparing our defense, saying that expenses may skyrocket if the matter went to trial. I authorized the payment, and my savings account took a significant blow. She also suggested that I hire a private investigator to review Lily's medical records and interview key witnesses. The investigator, Grant Holloway, a former police detective, visited Brooke's office on Wednesday to examine the matter. Grant has 28 years of law enforcement experience, focusing on fraud investigations and child welfare issues. He studied the complaint paperwork with skepticism. These bruise patterns are interesting, he told me. They have a consistent hue and distribution, which is rare for incidental injuries. Children who fall or bump into items develop dispersed bruises in various stages of healing. These appear to be purposeful injuries. I felt my stomach plummet. Are you claiming Vanessa harmed Lily to frame me? Grant stated that was one thing we wanted to look into, along with determining whether the medical documentation was authentic or perhaps forged. He'd ask for comprehensive copies of Lily's medical records and question her physician and the child psychologist who had submitted reports. He also wanted to check my residence for any risks or circumstances that may have caused Vanessa's injuries. I granted him permission to get anything he needed, determined to establish my innocence. Grant spent the next 17 days doing a comprehensive investigation, while Brooke prepared our legal answer to the complaint. Grant interviewed my neighbors who agreed that they saw me and Lily playing joyfully in my backyard that weekend, with no symptoms of discomfort. He collected my credit card receipts from the farmer's market and pizza delivery to document our activity and timing. He checked my backyard swing set and house inside, finding no dangerous hazards or sharp edges that may explain the bruise patterns in Vanessa's images. Most crucially, Grant received Lily's whole medical record from her doctor, Dr. Allison Mercer. The records indicated something unsettling. Lily had no history of bruises or injuries previous to the visit, which was documented 4 days after her stay with me. However, Dr. Mercer's notes contained a disturbing detail. When Vanessa brought Lily in, alleging the injuries occurred at my place, she appeared puzzled and reluctant when asked what had happened. The doctor saw that the child's replies appeared to be coached. Dr. Mercer was worried enough to submit a complaint with Child Protective Services, not about me, but about the chance that Vanessa was making up claims or injuring herself. CPS had launched an inquiry, but Vanessa had allegedly convinced them that the injuries occurred while Lily was in my care, diverting attention away from herself. Brooke filed our response to the lawsuit, disputing all charges and providing evidence that Lily was healthy throughout our weekend together. We also filed a complaint against Vanessa for defamation, abuse of process, and intentional infliction of mental distress, requesting that she produce proof to back up her claims. The counterclaim sought fines for bringing a frivolous case as well as damages for the harm done to my professional image. Vanessa's attorney, Travis Caldwell, an aggressive litigator, filed a request to dismiss our lawsuit, claiming that Vanessa was only safeguarding her daughter and had real worries about Lily. The judge dismissed the request, deciding that both the original complaint and the counterclaim would go to discovery. Discovery allowed both parties to subpoena papers, conduct depositions, and examine evidence. Brooke quickly subpoenaed Lily's entire medical records from all physicians, school records indicating any behavioral difficulties, and Vanessa's financial records to determine a possible reason. Travis fought back fiercely, objecting to virtually every discovery request and filed petitions to limit our access. The judge mainly agreed with us, acknowledging that if Vanessa was making serious charges of child endangerment, we had the right to investigate any relevant information. The medical documents that emerged throughout the investigation were enlightening. Vanessa had taken Lily to 4 separate physicians in the week after her stay with me, each saying that her injuries were the consequence of my irresponsible care. However, the bruises noted at each visit varied in size, color, and position, indicating that fresh injuries occurred after Lily went home. One emergency department physician expressed worry about the account not matching the injury pattern and called CPS again. Vanessa was frequently seeking medical attention for Lily while blaming me, but medical authorities questioned if the injuries were caused by Vanessa's care. Grant interviewed Dr. Allison Mercer, who talked cautiously owing to patient confidentiality, but said she had been worried about Vanessa's conduct since the beginning. The mother appeared more concerned with recording injuries and creating a story than with her daughter's real well-being. Dr. Mercer told Grant, "When I indicated that the bruises may be from hard play at home or another source, she grew angry and swore they happened at the aunt's place." However, Lily's replies did not corroborate that scenario. The toddler appeared to be afraid of her mother rather than traumatized by her time with her aunt. Brooke arranged depositions in July, beginning with Vanessa. I sat next to Brooke during the deposition in Travis Caldwell's downtown law office, where a court reporter chronicled everything. Vanessa came in an expensive suit, her look meticulously planned to convey mother concern and professional trustworthiness. She took the oath, and Brooke started asking her about the weekend Lily had with me. Vanessa reported dropping Lily off and being scared to leave her, stating she had a sense something would go wrong. When Brooke inquired what particular worries she had at the time, Vanessa stuttered and said it was just a mother's instinct. Brooke persisted, questioning why mom had left Lily with me if she had genuine worries. Vanessa said she had trusted her husband's judgment since I was his sister. Brooke provided the text message Ethan had given me weeks before the visit, clearly requesting if I could babysit and expressing trust in my abilities. Vanessa's face tensed, but she maintained she had been uneasy since the beginning. Brooke then inquired about bringing up Lily on Sunday afternoon, what condition she was in, and what I had told them about the weekend. Vanessa regarded me as evasive and suspicious, stating that I hustled them out of the house. I felt my rage mounting but maintained a neutral demeanor. That was a total falsehood. They had been distracted and rushed since Vanessa was continually checking her phone, and they had departed hastily on their own. Brooke shared the images I had shot over the weekend, which showed Lily happy and healthy with no obvious bruises. Vanessa disregarded them, claiming, "Bruises take time to appear, and the injuries must have occurred Sunday after the photos were taken." Brooke pressed her to explain how substantial bruising covering Lily's arms, legs, and back could develop in the short hours between my final shot at 10:45 a.m. Sunday and their pickup at 3:30 p.m., especially because Lily had been happily playing with toys and eating lunch at the time. Vanessa stated, "Children bruise easily, and I must have hurt Lily without realizing it." Brooke requested detailed instances of what I may have done to produce such bruises. Vanessa theorized that maybe I pulled Lily too hard, let her tumble, or was rough during playing. Brooke pointed out that none of these situations corresponded to the damage patterns depicted in the medical pictures, which showed consistent bruising, indicating purposeful force rather than incidental bumps. Vanessa grew defensive, claiming she was not a medical professional and was only trying to protect her baby. Brooke then inquired about the timing of medical appointments, specifically why Vanessa had brought Lily to 4 different physicians in 1 week. Vanessa stated that she was seeking second opinions because the initial doctors had not taken her worries seriously. Brooke inquired whether it was common for her to doctor shop when she disagreed with medical advice, and Travis objected, but the harm had been done. The pattern of activity seemed odd. The most devastating aspect of Vanessa's deposition was when Brooke inquired about her finances. Travis protested frequently, but the judge determined that financial motive was relevant to our defamation suit. Brooke inquired about Vanessa's work income, and Vanessa acknowledged that her sales commissions had dropped dramatically over the previous year, owing to industry changes and greater competition. Her yearly salary had decreased from $200,000 to around $110,000, putting her in financial difficulty. Brooke inquired if she and Ethan had discussed their financial concerns, and Vanessa grudgingly admitted that they had been bickering about money regularly. Brooke then inquired as to when Vanessa first heard that I had large homes insurance and professional liability coverage. Vanessa maintained she'd never considered my insurance, but her body language indicated otherwise. Brooke supplied phone records indicating that Vanessa phoned my insurance company 18 days before filing the case, inquiring about policy limitations and claims procedures. Vanessa's face became pallid. She mumbled that she'd been trying to figure out if insurance would cover Lily's medical expenses, but Brooke pointed out that my insurance wouldn't cover bills for injuries I supposedly caused, only damages paid through a lawsuit settlement. Vanessa had been investigating how much money she could possibly extract before making the complaint, indicating premeditation rather than genuine concern for Lily's well-being. Ethan's deposition was planned for the following week, and I feared meeting my brother after months of silence. He came at the legal office weary, with black bags under his eyes and significant weight loss on his face and body. When he noticed me seated with Brooke, his face shifted to one of shame or grief, but he swiftly averted his gaze. Brooke questioned him about Lily's weekend stay with me, and Ethan recalled leaving her down Friday evening and picking her up Sunday afternoon. He verified that I had noted the tiny knee scrape, that Lily appeared cheerful and thrilled about her weekend, and that neither he nor Vanessa had seen any serious injuries when they picked her up. Brooke inquired when he first learned of the bruises Vanessa said Lily had experienced. Vanessa told Ethan on Tuesday evening, 4 days after the weekend visit, that she saw bruises while helping Lily change clothes. He was frightened and suggested they take Lily to the pediatrician. Brooke inquired if he'd noticed the bruises before the doctor's visit, and Ethan revealed that he'd been traveling for work and hadn't inspected Lily until Friday evening. "So your understanding of Lily's injuries is purely based on what your wife told you?" Brooke confirmed. Ethan nodded, grudgingly. Brooke inquired about Ethan's relationship with me, how long we had been together, and whether he had ever expressed concerns about my care of Lily before to this event. Ethan's voice strained as he stated that we'd been close our entire lives, that I'd babysat Lily on a regular basis with no difficulties, and that he had total faith in me. Brooke inquired as to what had altered his mind, and what proof had convinced him that I had harmed his daughter. Ethan claimed the medical reports and images were persuasive, and that many doctors had recorded damage. Brooke showed him the images I'd taken throughout the weekend, the chronology showing Lily in good condition hours before pickup, and the troubling trends in the hospital records indicating injuries happened after Lily got home. Ethan looked over the evidence silently, his countenance concerned. Brooke bluntly inquired whether he had ever considered the notion that someone other than me may be to blame for Lily's injuries. Travis complained furiously, but Ethan spoke nevertheless, his voice barely audible. He admitted he had reservations, but Vanessa had been so adamant and intent on proving the case against me. Brooke inquired if Ethan had seen any changes in Vanessa's conduct during the previous year, particularly in relation to their financial burden. Ethan stated Vanessa had grown increasingly concerned with money, making remarks about others who had received insurance payouts or settlements to help them with their issues. He disregarded them as stress-related venting, but as he sat in the deposition studying the facts, his expression became increasingly skeptical of his wife's account of events. The most crucial development in the case occurred when CPS investigator Monica Reed phoned Brooke's office, seeking to meet. Monica, a 12-year Child Protective Services veteran, had been assigned to examine the complaints made by Lily's physicians. She arrived in Brooke's office on a Friday morning, carrying her case file and wearing a very disturbed countenance. She added that CPS had been following the case from the original doctor's findings, including home visits and interviews with family members. Monica claimed she had interviewed Lily several times, and the child's comments had been contradictory and alarming. Monica informed me that Lily had not described any incidences at your place that may explain her injuries. When I asked her what occurred with Aunt Claire, she mentioned baking cookies and going to the market. When I asked her how she acquired the bruises, she remained silent and stared at her mother. Children who have been through trauma frequently have clear memories of the occurrence, even if they are reluctant to share it. Lily had no trauma reaction to you, but she did display fear responses when her mother was present during our interviews. Monica had suggested supervised visits and a forensic child interview at the county's Child Advocate Center, but Vanessa had declined, stating it would further traumatize Lily. Monica accused Vanessa of faking the claims or inflicting the injuries herself, thus her resistance aroused red flags. Monica had been constructing her own case, recording concerns but lacking conclusive evidence until lately. Lily's kindergarten teacher alerted CPS after noticing disturbing conduct. Mrs. Sandra Whitaker, Lily's teacher, stated that she had grown distant and worried at school, with frequent mishaps and sobbing in class. More importantly, Mrs. Whitaker had observed new bruises on Lily's arms on multiple occasions after weekends at home, injuries that had not been apparent when Lily left school on Friday. Mrs. Whitaker had recorded these findings with dates and images taken with parental consent during a session in which she voiced her concerns to Vanessa. Vanessa disregarded the marks as normal kid injuries, but the instructor became worried enough to submit her findings to CPS. Monica had questioned Mrs. Whitaker extensively, and the teacher's notes revealed a pattern of injuries that occurred only when Lily was in Vanessa's care, not during school hours or the weekend she had spent with me. Monica also learned that Vanessa had spent several weeks studying personal injury cases and insurance claims before filing against me. Her browsing history, obtained through a CPS request, revealed searches for phrases such as homeowner insurance payout limitations, suing a family member for carelessness, and, most dangerously, how to document kid injuries for legal purposes. The pattern implied planned planning rather than a mother who really cared about her child's well-being. Monica informed Brooke that she was prepared to testify that, in her professional view, the evidence indicated Vanessa had manufactured or potentially caused Lily's injuries to support a bogus lawsuit against me. CPS was ready to file a dependency petition to take Lily from Vanessa's care, while further investigating the mother's abuse accusations. However, Monica cautioned that these situations were complicated and difficult to establish conclusively without direct proof or admission. We wanted more specific evidence, possibly video or witness testimony, that Vanessa was inflicting harm. The difficulty was that most abuse took place in secret, making it extremely hard to document firsthand. Brooke inquired whether there was any way to create circumstances in which Vanessa could divulge her actions or intentions. Monica stated clearly that she could not counsel entrapment, but if Ethan agreed to put security cameras in the home under the premise of general security concerns, any film gathered would be acceptable. The concern was whether Ethan would comply, given his apparent allegiance to Vanessa despite mounting proof of her lying. Brooke proposed we meet Ethan discreetly, without Vanessa there, and explain the amassed evidence that his wife had been fabricating a case against me while potentially abusing their kid. Arranging a meeting with Ethan alone was tough. Vanessa appeared to keep a close eye on his communications and schedule, accompanying him to the majority of his activities and ensuring his availability. Grant Holloway was eventually able to reach Ethan at his office, contacting him from the hospital parking lot and hurriedly emphasizing that he needed to examine the evidence we had obtained before the case could advance. Ethan grudgingly agreed to meet at a coffee shop near his office during his lunch break, most likely since the invitation came from an investigator rather than directly from me, which may have raised Vanessa's concerns. Brooke, Grant and I waited at a corner table in the packed cafe on Wednesday afternoon, watching Ethan arrive looking tired and drained. He sat down without ordering anything, maintaining a defensive posture. Brooke began by thanking him for meeting and acknowledged that the situation was upsetting for all parties involved. She claimed she wanted to provide him evidence he may not have seen because Vanessa controlled the narrative. Ethan began to disagree, but Brooke opened her laptop and exhibited the chronology she had created. Photos of Lily looking healthy and cheerful were taken at my house only hours before she was picked up. Medical records reveal that bruising appeared 4 days later, with patterns that were incongruous with an accidental incident. Multiple doctors have expressed worry that the account does not fit the injuries. CPS reports Lily's frightened reactions around Vanessa. The kindergarten instructor observed injuries occurring during weekends at home, not before. Ethan's expression shifted as he evaluated the facts, from defensive to dawning fear. Brooke showed him Vanessa's browsing history, insurance research, and the pattern of financial stress that drove a fake claim. She gave him phone records proving Vanessa called my insurance company many days before filing suit. Ethan's hands shook as he grasped the laptop, reading through documents that contradicted everything his wife had said. Brooke gently inquired whether he had ever seen Vanessa be hard with Lily, lose her anger, or exhibit troubling behavior with their kid. Ethan was silent for a long time before saying that Vanessa had been increasingly irritable over the last year, occasionally shouting at Lily for small offenses or forcibly gripping her arm when upset. He ascribed it to job stress and never anticipated it would develop to willful damage. However, after reviewing the material, the pattern was clear. Vanessa had made up a case against me in order to get my insurance money, and she was ready to damage their kid to make her tale credible. Ethan's eyes welled up with tears as the knowledge hit him full force. He asked Brooke what he should do, and she indicated the primary concern was to keep Lily safe from future violence. Brooke indicated that CPS was about to remove Lily from her home, which would be painful and public. An alternative was for Ethan to take voluntary custody, separate from Vanessa, and cooperate with the inquiry. Monica Reed had stated that CPS would approve this arrangement provided Ethan consented to monitored visits with Vanessa and the installation of security cameras to record exchanges. Ethan inquired whether this meant divorcing his wife, to which Brooke replied that it was very likely the case. But more crucially, it meant protecting his daughter from someone who had demonstrated a willingness to harm her for financial gain. Ethan sat quietly, contemplating everything, the weight of treachery and guilt visible on his face. He finally asked what I wanted. I spoke for the first time, my voice calm despite the emotion that threatened to burst forth. I wanted Lily to be protected. Ethan's friendship with me was mended, and Vanessa was held accountable for her actions. Ethan nodded slowly and stated he needed to see the proof for himself. He needed to see Vanessa's actions firsthand before dissolving his marriage based on circumstantial evidence. Grant recommended Ethan install security cameras that evening under the guise of basic house security, a logical rationale that Vanessa was unlikely to challenge. Ethan agreed to try, but his look indicated that he really hoped we were mistaken about his wife's conduct. Ethan bought a wireless security system that afternoon and installed cameras in the living room, kitchen, and Lily's room that evening. He informed Vanessa he was concerned about a string of break-ins in their area, which she accepted without question. The cameras recorded audio and sent motion detection alerts to an app on Ethan's phone. For the first 36 hours, the tape revealed typical family interactions, with nothing worrying or troublesome. Then, on Saturday morning, 4 days after installation, the bedroom camera acquired footage that altered everything. Vanessa entered Lily's room about 6:15 a.m. Ethan was out running errands. Lily was calmly playing with dolls, while Vanessa sat on the bed, observing her daughter with an expression that made my stomach turn when Ethan showed us the video later. Cold and calculating. Vanessa rushed out abruptly and grabbed Lily's upper arm, twisting it so hard that Lily shouted out. She then grabbed the opposite arm, leaving what would undoubtedly be obvious marks. Lily was weeping, wondering what she had done wrong. Vanessa's voice on the audio was unsettling. "Stop sobbing, or I'll give you something to truly cry over. We need to see the doctor again, and you're going to tell them Aunt Claire was hard with you throughout the appointments. Understand?" Lily, bewildered and scared, stated that she never longer visited Aunt Claire. Vanessa said, "I am aware of this, but the physicians are not. You're going to tell them you still visit your aunt, and she injured you this time too." The video proceeded for another 4 minutes, with Vanessa intentionally injuring Lily's arms and legs while instructing her daughter on what to tell physicians. Lily was weeping, plainly unable to comprehend why her mother was hurting her, and Vanessa's demeanor remained flat and businesslike throughout. She was fabricating proof for her case, inflicting new injuries to back her continual allegations of my wrongdoing. When she finished, Vanessa ordered Lily to stop sobbing and get ready because they were heading to urgent care. The camera caught her studying her daughter's arms with joy, seemingly happy with the noticeable bruises she'd caused. Ethan had been outdoors throughout the event and returned home to discover Lily distressed and Vanessa alleging the infant had fallen. Later that evening, he checked the film and discovered what his wife had done. He contacted Brooke soon away, his voice quivering, and told her, "We'd been right about everything." Vanessa had been assaulting Lily to support a fake lawsuit, and the proof was now on camera. Brooke instructed Ethan to secure the film immediately, make numerous copies, and call Monica Reed at CPS. She also instructed him to remove Lily out of the house that night, if possible, and take her somewhere secure till police interfered. Ethan brought Lily to his parents' place Saturday evening, informing Vanessa that his mother was ill and needed assistance. Once Lily was secure with her grandparents, Ethan contacted 911 and reported child abuse, supplying the authorities with CCTV footage. At 9:40 p.m., police arrived at Ethan's residence and discovered Vanessa home, alone. When presented with video proof, she initially denied everything, saying the movie was modified or created. However, the metadata remained intact, the timestamps were checked, and her actions were unmistakable. Vanessa was arrested on allegations of child abuse, fraud, and making a fake police report. She was hauled into county prison and bail was set at $125,000. Ethan filed an emergency custody petition that night, receiving temporary exclusive custody of Lily and suspending Vanessa's visits awaiting criminal procedures. CPS obtained temporary custody of Lily, placing her with Ethan's parents while Ethan completed parenting exams and determined that his household was secure. The inquiry grew quickly, with authorities realizing it wasn't just a personal incident, but a planned fraud operation targeting family members with bogus abuse charges. The next Monday, Vanessa's attorney Travis Caldwell submitted an emergency move to dismiss her lawsuit against me, acknowledging that the case had crumbled with his client's detention. Brooke contested the dismissal, stating that our case for defamation and malicious prosecution should be pursued to hold Vanessa liable for damages. The judge agreed, dismissing Vanessa's initial claims with prejudice and allowed our case to proceed. Travis dropped Vanessa's representation because he did not want to defend her against both criminal accusations and civil liabilities. Vanessa engaged Julian Cross, an expensive lawyer who specialized in defending white-collar offenders. Julian quickly began talking with prosecutors, hoping to reduce charges and avoid a trial. However, the video evidence was terrible, demonstrating planned abuse of a kid for financial benefit. Prosecutors were not interested in plea offers that did not entail significant jail term. The tale was found by the media, and local news sources began to report on the mother who beat her kid in order to accuse her sister-in-law for carelessness. The tale went viral regionally, with many outraged by Vanessa's premeditated brutality. My nurse supervisor at the hospital contacted to offer her support, telling me that my job was secure, and that the hospital management realized I had been wrongfully accused. Colleagues sent letters of solidarity, and some volunteered to testify about my character if necessary. The criminal trial moved rapidly, with prosecutors determined to make an example of Vanessa's atrocious actions. The trial lasted 6 days, and the jurors saw surveillance footage of Vanessa intentionally harming Lily while encouraging her to lie about my care. They heard evidence from Dr. Allison Mercer, Mrs. Sandra Whitaker, Monica Reed, and many medical specialists who explained how the damage patterns indicated purposeful maltreatment rather than accidental harm. Ethan testified regarding Vanessa's financial hardship, her investigation into insurance claims, and her changed conduct toward Lily over the last year. I testified about Lily's stay with me over the weekend, outlining her typical activities and her health when she departed. The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours before returning guilty verdicts on all charges, including child abuse, fraud, submitting false reports, and conspiring to conduct insurance fraud. The judge set the sentence for 7 weeks later, giving time for pre-sentencing reports and victim impact statements. Lily's therapist, who had been working with her since Ethan took custody, gave a lengthy report on the psychological harm caused by Vanessa's abuse. Lily struggled with anxiety, trust concerns, and bewilderment about why her mother had abused her. The therapist's prognosis was cautiously hopeful, believing Lily may heal with constant therapy and a secure family setting, but the trauma would have long-lasting consequences. Vanessa's behavior was harshly criticized by the judge at the sentence hearing. She'd misused her role as a mother, taken advantage of her daughter's weakness, and manipulated the judicial system to perpetrate fraud against a family member who had shown nothing but love for her niece. The judge ruled that Vanessa's premeditated planning and lack of remorse deserved harsh punishment. She sentenced the defendants to 14 years in state prison, with the possibility of release after serving 80% of their time. Vanessa's face remained expressionless as the sentence was read, displaying the same frigid look seen on security film. She was promptly remanded to custody and began her prison sentence at the Women's Penitentiary Institution, 55 miles north of the city. Ethan filed for divorce the same week, and Vanessa's parental rights were terminated during a separate family court hearing. She would have no contact with Lily, nor would she have legal parental rights. The abortion was important to give Lily with stability and prevent her from future damage. However, Ethan felt regret for removing Lily's mother from her life. However, Vanessa had wrecked that relationship by her own vicious behavior. Our legal complaint against Vanessa was filed concurrently, claiming damages for the harm her false charges caused me professionally and emotionally. My attorney's expenses had topped $52,000. I'd lost freelance nursing gigs because of the time I spent defending myself, and the first claims had harmed my image. Brooke contended that Vanessa should be held financially liable for these losses, even though she lacked the means to pay. The court agreed and awarded me $310,000 in compensation and punitive damages. Vanessa held a rental property purchased before to her marriage, which was sold to help meet the judgment. Following the sale, I earned around $110,000, with the remaining judgment amount attached to any future assets or income Vanessa may receive after being released from jail. The money helped pay my legal bills and compensate for missed income, but it couldn't undo the emotional harm or lost time. More importantly, the verdict served as a formal recognition that Vanessa's acts were improper and damaging, confirming my experience and cleansing my name. Rebuilding my bond with Ethan and Lily required time and care. Ethan was saddened by Vanessa's treachery, feeling guilty for not seeing her behavior sooner, and defending Lily more successfully. He went to individual treatment and family counseling with Lily, trying to comprehend the trauma they'd been through and build healthy interactions. Lily was first perplexed as to why her mother was gone and whether she had done something wrong. Her therapist helped her realize that people, not children, are accountable for adult decisions, and that her mother's actions were not Lily's responsibility. Lily gradually grew more comfortable and fun, like the demeanor I recalled from before the lawsuit. Ethan asked whether I'd be prepared to spend more time with Lily, albeit under supervision at first, in order to restore our bond after the trauma. I accepted warily, meeting them at parks and restaurants where Lily would feel comfortable. She was cautious and apprehensive at first, but after a few visits, she was hugging me and asking if we could bake cookies like we did that fateful weekend. Children's tenacity never ceases to astonish me. And Ethan and I sought to mend our strained sibling relationship, acknowledging the hurt his decision to trust Vanessa had caused, but also comprehending the deception he'd faced. He apologized several times for questioning me, for prioritizing his wife's version of events over our longtime friendship, and for putting me through months of legal misery fighting against false claims. I appreciated his apology, but deeds were more important than words. Ethan demonstrated his dedication to restoring trust by consistently involving me in Lily's life, being open about his problems and worries, and actively attempting to be a better father and brother. We went to family therapy together, processing the betrayal and pain while creating new patterns of communication and trust. It wasn't simple or quick, but we eventually found our way back to a partnership that seemed genuine, albeit different from what existed before to Vanessa's destructive behavior. Some wounds leave persistent scars that alter the terrain long after healing. Lily is now 9 years old, flourishing in 2nd grade, and shows no symptoms of the trauma she endured. She sees her therapist every 6 weeks for maintenance sessions, addressing concerns as they occur, but otherwise doing well. She lives with Ethan in a smaller house he bought after selling the home he had with Vanessa, making new memories in an environment free of her mother's cruelty. I meet Lily around twice a month for dinners or trips. We've baked cookies several times since the lawsuit, reclaiming the hobby as something pleasant rather than something tainted by Vanessa's bogus allegations. Lily calls me Aunt Claire and tells me about school, friends, and anything else piques her 9-year-old interest. She doesn't mention her mother and I don't bring her up. If Lily asks questions, Ethan responds honestly but age-appropriately, explaining that her mother made horrible decisions that damaged others and is now in jail as a result. It's unclear if Lily will want to pursue that relationship as she grows older, but for the time being, she's content to be a child surrounded by grown-ups who protect rather than exploit her. 3 years after Vanessa's conviction, I got a letter forwarded from Brooke's office. Vanessa had written a 4-page handwritten message from prison, seeking to offer an apology or explanation. I read it once and filed it away without reacting. Vanessa had been suffering from mental illness and financial desperation, according to the letter, and she had convinced herself that the aims justified the methods, despite her guilt for hurting Lily and destroying her family. There was no meaningful recognition of the specific hurt she had caused me. No true regret for faking abuse charges and subjecting me to legal agony. The letter read more like an attempt to repair her own self-esteem than genuine accountability. I had no desire to communicate with the lady who attempted to destroy my life and harm my niece in order to have access to my insurance money. Brooke informed me that I was under no need to answer, so I chose silence. Some people do not merit your time or forgiveness, especially when their apologies suit their interests rather than addressing your pain. Vanessa's charges against me had no lasting effect on my career. My professional reputation was restored once the truth was revealed in public and she was found guilty of fraud and abuse. The hospital published a statement defending me and admitting I had been wrongfully accused, which helped to dispel any remaining doubt. I got emails from co-workers, past patients, relatives and community people expressing both support and indignation over Vanessa's actions. Some people related their own experiences with false allegations or familial betrayal, seeking solace in my narrative. After seeing Lily's exploitation and injury, I returned to work at the pediatric emergency room, filled with a newfound sense of duty to safeguard children. Every shift reminded me of why my work was important, why advocating for vulnerable children was critical, and how quickly systems may fail without alert experts asking questions. The experience helped me become a better nurse, more sensitive to discrepancies in injury excuses, and more likely to disclose concerns even when family members were believable and sympathetic. Looking back on all that transpired, I was filled with mixed feelings about Vanessa, Ethan, and the legal system. Vanessa received proper punishment for her actions, including time in prison for assaulting Lily and attempting to mislead me. The justice system eventually managed to expose her falsehoods and hold her accountable. However, the procedure was lengthy, costly, and stressful. I spent months defending myself against bogus claims, watching my money dwindle due to legal bills, and fearing for my professional future. The system only worked because I had the funds to engage skilled attorneys and detectives. Medical professionals recorded their worries, and Ethan finally decided to believe the facts over his wife. Without those circumstances, Vanessa may have succeeded in her fraud plot, destroying me and continuing to torture Lily. That truth is frightening, illustrating how many individuals suffer false charges and lack the means or assistance to adequately defend themselves. Despite the fact that the experience was traumatic, I was fortunate in some respects. Others in identical conditions may not have the same benefits or consequences. Ethan periodically asks if I've forgiven Vanessa, and I really don't know how to respond. Forgiveness means letting go of animosity and wishing the individual well, neither of which adequately describe how I feel. I'm no longer angry, but I don't wish Vanessa well, or hope for her salvation. She took deliberate decisions to harm her kid and wreck my life for financial gain. These decisions showed her nature in ways that cannot be undone by time or punishment. I've moved on, rebuilt my life and connections, and discovered serenity. But that is not the same as forgiveness. Perhaps certain behaviors are unworthy of forgiveness, or perhaps I am incapable of such grace. In any case, I no longer care what Vanessa emotionally deserves from me. She's no longer important in my life, except as a cautionary story about trusting the wrong people, and the harm that financial desperation can do. Lily deserved better than the mother she had. Ethan deserved more than the lady he married, and I deserved better than having my feelings for my niece turned against me. We all survived, and that must be enough. Thank you for staying till the end. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss the next one. My family demanded I drain my savings for my golden child brother. I said nothing, until the CEO buying my company crashed our family BBQ. My parents secretly orchestrated a public family tribunal to humiliate me into paying my golden child brother's $12,500 debt. threatening to kick me out if I refused. They thought they were backing a helpless, mid-level IT worker into a corner, completely unaware that the family friend I brought to the party was actually a CEO finalizing the $8.5 million acquisition of my tech startup. I'm Caleb, 25 years old. The air in our living room was thick with the suffocating smell of my mother Diane's famous pot roast and the absolute stench of cheap hypocrisy. It was a Tuesday evening, just days before our annual neighborhood summer barbecue, an event my parents, Arthur and Diane, threw every single year just to showcase their perfect family to relatives and neighbors. Laughter usually echoed from the backyard during these warm months, but inside, here in the heart of the house, a storm was brewing that had been 20 years in the making. My father stood before me, his face a mask of stern disappointment, his shoulders squared like a judge about to pass a life sentence. My mother was beside him, dabbing at eyes that weren't actually crying, playing the role of the distressed matriarch perfectly. And my younger brother, Mason, 22, the source of all this misery, stood slightly behind them, a smug little smirk playing on his lips. Caleb, my father's voice boomed, loud enough that if the windows had been open, the entire street would have heard him. Your mother and I have been more than patient. Mason made a mistake. A small business venture that didn't work out. It's a $12,500 debt. A simple mistake. That's what we are calling it. I mentally scoffed. A mistake. That's what they called it. I called it funding a lifestyle of VIP club tables, bottle service, and expensive designer streetwear with credit card money he didn't actually have. Family helps family. My mother added, her voice trembling with practiced fragility, stepping forward to place a delicate hand on my father's arm. You have a good, stable job in computers. It's your duty to help your brother get back on his feet. He just needs a little push. I stayed silent, my gaze fixed on a small, jagged crack in the drywall just over my father's left shoulder. I had watched that crack spread for years, tracing its path during countless lectures, watching it grow just like the fractures in our family. My absolute silence seemed to enrage him. The vein in his neck began to pulse. Are you listening to me? He snapped, taking a threatening step forward. We are giving you a choice, Caleb. You will transfer the money to Mason's account by the end of the week, or you will pack your bags and find somewhere else to live. We will not harbor an ungrateful, selfish son under our roof. The room fell completely silent. The hum of the refrigerator suddenly sounded like a jet engine. Every eye was on me. Mason looked triumphant. He had won, as he always did. My father crossed his arms, a final, non-negotiable gesture that he used to end every argument since I was a child. Well, what's it going to be? I slowly raised my eyes from the crack in the wall and looked at him, then at my mother, then at Mason. I didn't say a single word. I just let the silence stretch, letting their toxic ultimatum hang in the air like poison gas. To understand my silence in that moment, to understand why I didn't break down crying or explode in a fit of screaming anger, you have to know that this wasn't the first time I was made the sacrificial lamb for my family's golden child. It was just going to be the last. My role as the family's invisible support system started incredibly early. I was 12 years old when my mother sat me down at the kitchen table and informed me that I was old enough to pay for my own school lunches. We're not made of money, Caleb. You need to learn responsibility. She'd sighed, while simultaneously signing a permission slip for a 10-year-old Mason to go on an out-of-state school ski trip that cost well over $250. So, I learned the value of $1. I started with a grueling paper route, waking up at 4:30 a.m. every single morning, 7 days a week. My fingers would go completely numb from the biting winter cold as I folded newspapers on the icy porch, my breath pluming in the dark air. That money went straight to the school cafeteria and then to my own school supplies. I vividly remember being 13 and standing in the stationery aisle at the local superstore, carefully calculating if I could afford the durable, name-brand binders, or if I had to settle for the flimsy cardboard ones that would inevitably fall apart by November. Meanwhile, Mason would come home with a brand new video game console, a gift from our dad just for getting a B- on a basic middle school science project. My first real job was at 14, bagging groceries at the local supermarket. The work was mind-numbing, standing on hard linoleum floors for hours, but the paycheck was a genuine lifeline. It bought me clothes not the trendy, expensive streetwear brands Mason flaunted, but clean, unbranded shirts and stiff jeans from the discount outlet. I'll never forget the sting of my mother's words when she saw me in a new pair of jeans I'd proudly bought myself after saving for 3 weeks. Couldn't you find something better? It's a little embarrassing, she murmured, her nose wrinkled in distaste, right before handing Mason a crisp $100 bill for a weekend trip to the city with his friends. There was never any acknowledgement that the only reason I wore those clothes was because they flat out refused to provide for me. The double standard was always clearest during meal times. Family dinners were a theatrical performance. My parents would cook lavish meals, but my portion was always noticeably smaller. Or I was told to make myself a peanut butter sandwich because there wasn't quite enough of the roast to go around. Yet, If Mason wanted a second or third helping, the platter was practically shoved his way with a beaming, adoring smile. On Fridays, they would order gourmet pizza or expensive sushi, a treat for themselves and their hardworking son, Mason. I would be locked in my room, the delicious smells wafting maliciously under my door, eating a 90-cent bowl of instant ramen I'd bought with my own grocery store wages. The message was loud and clear: my needs were an inconvenience, his desires were an absolute priority. One Christmas when I was 16, the disparity was laid bare for everyone to see. Mason, who had been begging for a new gaming setup, unwrapped a top-of-the-line PC rig worth over $1,500. He screamed in excitement, hugging my parents. My present from them? A $75 gift card to a generic department store. I forced a smile, swallowed the massive lump in my throat, and said thank you. But the hollowness in my chest was suffocating. Later that day, I overheard my father boasting to my Uncle Vance in the kitchen. We have to support Mason's passion. He has the reflexes. He could be an esports professional one day. You have to invest in your kids' dreams. My passion was coding, something I did on a battered, second-hand laptop I had saved up for 8 months to buy from a pawn shop. They never once asked to see a single project I had built. They didn't even know what language I was programming in. To them, it was a distraction, a waste of electricity. It wasn't a passion because it didn't come with a flashy price tag they could show off to the neighbors. That was the exact year I stopped expecting anything from them. It was easier to rely entirely on myself than to nurse the constant, agonizing ache of disappointment. My earnings, my efforts, my dreams, they were mine and mine alone, completely invisible to the very people who were supposed to see me most clearly. College was my escape. Not a physical one, since I couldn't afford the exorbitant dorm fees and had to commute an hour each way from home, but it was an intellectual and emotional refuge. It was there, in a stuffy, neon-lit computer lab smelling of ozone, hot dust, and stale coffee, that I met Eli. He was brilliant, funny, and had a restless, manic energy that perfectly matched my own quiet intensity. We were paired up for an advanced algorithms project, and within an hour, we were finishing each other's sentences, our coding styles syncing up in a way that felt almost telepathic. Eli was the first person who truly saw me. Not the quiet, overshadowed, neglected son, but the builder, the architect. He'd look at a piece of my code and his eyes would light up with genuine awe. "Dude, this architecture is insane. How did you even conceptualize this?" He'd say, shaking his head. For someone completely used to his absolute best efforts being met with cold indifference, his praise was like water in a scorching desert. He came from a radically different kind of family, one that was loud, messy, but full of overwhelming warmth. The first time I had dinner at his house, his mom piled my plate impossibly high with lasagna, and his dad asked me a dozen questions about my major, genuinely interested in my answers. It felt so foreign, so deeply normal. I saw what I had been missing my entire life, and it both hurt profoundly and gave me an incredible sense of hope. Eli's dusty, disorganized garage became our sanctuary. After my classes and my part-time job at a local phone repair shop, I'd drive straight there. We'd spend hours huddled over our glowing laptops, wrapped in blankets during the winter, fueled by cheap energy drinks, generic pizza, and a massive shared dream. We were building something. An AI-driven logistics and workflow tool that we believed could completely revolutionize how mid-sized tech firms manage their internal operations. We called it Nexus Flow AI. It was our secret, our absolute obsession. While my family saw me coming home late, exhausted, with dark circles under my eyes, and assumed I was just wasting my life, Eli and I were building an empire, line by painstaking line of code. He was the visionary, the big-picture guy who could sell ice to an Eskimo. I was the architect, the one who built the intricate, flawless systems that made his grand vision a functioning reality. The only family member who ever seemed to believe in me was my grandmother, my dad's mom. She lived 3 states away, but she would call every single Sunday at 4 p.m. sharp. She never pried, but she had a way of listening that made you feel completely heard. I told her about my classes, about Eli, but never about my miserable family life. I didn't have to. I think she always knew. Before she passed away, she sent me a letter. Inside was a check for $750 and a short note written in her shaky, elegant cursive. "Caleb, your grandfather and I always saw the quiet fire in you. Don't ever let anyone make you feel small. This isn't much, but use it for your dreams. Make us proud." That $750 became the literal seed money for Nexus Flow AI. We used it to buy vital server space and a few crucial software licenses we desperately needed to launch our beta. That letter, however, was priceless. I kept it taped to the concrete wall in Eli's garage workspace. On the nights when I was drowning in utter exhaustion and crushing self-doubt, when the cold indifference of my parents felt like a physical weight crushing my lungs, I would read her words. "Don't ever let anyone make you feel small." It became my mantra. It was the absolute foundation on which I built not just our company, but myself. The catalyst for the final, Explosive storm came, as it always did, from Mason. After dropping out of his second attempt at community college claiming the professors were stifling his creativity, he decided he was going to be an entrepreneur. My parents, completely blinded by their obsessive favoritism, thought it was a brilliant, brave idea. They gave him a few $1,000s as a business loan for what he called a premium luxury watch resale venture. In reality, he was buying hyped-up timepieces on high-interest credit cards, completely failing to sell them for a profit because he didn't understand the market, and using the remaining cash to fund a lifestyle of VIP club tables, expensive dinners, and weekend beach trips that he plastered all over his social media. The inevitable, catastrophic crash came swiftly. One of his sketchy suppliers called the house, threatening legal action over a massive unpaid invoice. The credit card bills piled up, demanding minimum payments he couldn't meet. The grand total of his business mistake was a little over $12,500. He confessed to our parents in the kitchen, crying real tears, framing himself as a tragic victim of a volatile global market and malicious competitors. They, of course, bought his ridiculous story completely. Around the exact same time, something else was happening. Nexus Flow AI was finally getting noticed. We had entered and won a regional tech incubator competition, which came with a small grant and a little bit of media coverage. The article was buried on page 8 of the local business journal, but someone saw it. Jason. He was a guy I grew up with. Someone I'd considered a decent friend. We'd reconnected a few months prior, and I had helped him out with a small $200 loan when he was in a tight spot with his rent. He called me after seeing the article. "Hey man, saw that piece on your company. Sounds like you're absolutely killing it. You must be rolling in it, bro." I laughed it off, exhausted from a 1-4-hour coding sprint. "It's a startup, man. We're mostly running on caffeine and blind hope right now. We are a long way from rolling in it." I was being completely honest. We were aggressively reinvesting every single penny back into the business. My personal checking account was barely hovering in the low 4 figures, but Jason heard exactly what he wanted to hear. He saw the words AI, award-winning, and founder, and his brain translated it to secret millionaire. And in a pathetic effort to ingratiate himself with my parents, he mentioned it to my father the next time he saw him at the local hardware store. "You must be so incredibly proud of Caleb," Jason had said. "I hear his tech company is the next big thing. He's probably pulling down a massive corporate salary." That was the spark that lit the dynamite. My parents, already panicking and losing sleep about Mason's mounting $12,500 debt, suddenly had a magical solution presented to them on a silver platter. Their forgotten, neglected son, the one they never invested a single dime in, was supposedly a secret financial success. In their twisted minds, my money wasn't mine. It was family money. It was the perfect solution to their Mason problem. The final piece of the trap was set by my Aunt Beatrice, my mother's older sister. During one of their daily, gossipy phone calls, my mother tearfully confessed the dire situation with Mason's debt. Aunt Beatrice, a grandmaster of passive aggression, said something that sealed my fate. "Oh, Diane, that's just terrible. But, I'm sure Caleb would be more than happy to help. That's what a good son does. My boy just put a down payment on a new car for us. It's so wonderful when your children can finally give back. I'm sure Caleb, with his successful new computer company, feels the exact same way." The comparison, the implied judgment, the painting of me as a potential deadbeat monster if I refused to bail out my brother, it was the perfect psychological manipulation. When my mother hung up the phone, the idea had solidified into concrete. It wasn't a request for help anymore. It was an absolute expectation. A demand. My supposed success had just become my curse. The week before the annual neighborhood barbecue was when they finally made their move. They cornered me in the living room, the same room where the public execution would later be attempted. The TV was completely off, which was the first glaring sign of trouble. My father never, ever missed the evening news. "Caleb, sit down," he commanded, pointing to the armchair opposite the sofa where he and my mother sat like a tribunal. Mason was nowhere to be seen, which I knew was intentional. They wanted to handle this delicate matter first before bringing him in. I remained standing, crossing my arms. "I'm fine here. What's going on?" My mother started, her voice laced with a rehearsed, sickening sweetness that immediately set my teeth on edge. "Honey, we know you've been working so incredibly hard on your little computer project. It's a company, Mom, not a project." She waved a dismissive, manicured hand. "Whatever it is, we're very proud of you. We heard from Jason that you're doing very, very well for yourself." The pieces instantly clicked into place. "Jason. Of course. Jason doesn't know what he's talking about," I said flatly. "We're a startup. There's no big salary. Every dime goes back into the servers." My father scoffed loudly, leaning forward, his face hardening. "Don't lie to us, Caleb. We're your parents. We know you've always been extremely responsible with your money. You've got a nest egg hidden away. Meanwhile, your brother, your own flesh and blood, is in deep trouble. Mason got himself into trouble, I stated, my voice dropping to a dangerously calm register. He spent money he didn't have on luxury things he didn't need to impress people who don't care about him. He had a dream. My mother cried out, clutching her chest as if Mason were a martyred artist instead of a failed sneaker and watch reseller. You of all people should understand that. We supported your little computer hobby all these years. The sheer audacity of that statement almost made me burst into hysterical laughter. Supported me? They had actively ignored me. They had forced me to support myself since I was a literal child. The only support they ever gave was the physical roof over my head, something they held over me like a guillotine blade every time I stepped out of line. So, this is what this is about, I said, finally connecting all the dots. Mason's $12,500 debt, you want me to pay it? It's the right thing to do. My father said, his tone shifting from fake parental concern to a cold, hard, authoritative demand. We gave you life. We fed you, we clothed you. We've given you a home even now, as a grown man, don't you think you owe us? Don't you think you owe your brother? Every single sacrifice I had ever made flashed before my eyes in rapid succession. The missed high school parties because I was working. The worn out, hole-filled shoes I wore through 3 winters. The lonely quiet dinners of instant ramen while they laughed over steak. I had been paying my own way for over a decade. The debt I supposedly owed them was a total fiction they had created to justify their own colossal failures as parents. A lifetime of suppressed, toxic anger began to bubble up inside me, hot and clarifying. For the first time in my entire existence, I didn't feel the desperate need to defend myself or explain my finances. I just felt completely, utterly done. I looked my father straight in the eye. No. The word, quiet and absolute, hung in the air between us like a physical object. His face turned a dark, furious shade of plum red. What did you just say to me? I said no, I repeated, my voice much stronger this time, echoing off the walls. This is Mason's debt, not mine. I am not paying a single cent of it. Letter. My mother gasped dramatically, tears springing to her eyes. Caleb, how can you be so selfish, so incredibly cruel, after everything we've done for you? What have you done? I asked, the question entirely genuine. What have you actually done for me? You taught me to be self-sufficient by abandoning me emotionally. You taught me the value of $1 by making me earn every single one I ever had while you handed Mason everything on a silver platter. And now you want to take my hard-earned dollars for the son you actually care about. The answer is no. I turned on my heel and walked out of the room, leaving them sputtering in stunned, furious silence. I walked up the stairs, my heart pounding against my ribs like a trapped bird. I knew it wasn't over. I had just declared thermonuclear war. Update 1. My defiance did not inspire any self-reflection. It inspired pure, unadulterated rage. The very next day, the atmosphere in the house turned from icy to venomous. They communicated entirely through aggressively slammed doors, violently clattering dishes, and passive-aggressive comments muttered just loud enough for me to hear from the hallway. Some children just have absolutely no gratitude. My mother would sigh dramatically on the phone to her friends. Can you believe the selfishness of this generation? I knew they were planning something. My parents, especially my father, possessed egos as fragile as spun glass. They could not stand having their supreme authority challenged. Losing control, especially in front of me, was an intolerable, unforgivable offense. Their solution, as always, was to escalate the situation until I broke. If private pressure didn't work, public humiliation was the next logical step in their playbook. The annual neighborhood barbecue, now less than a week away, was the absolute perfect venue. I discovered the full extent of their deranged plan completely by accident. I was heading to the basement laundry room to grab my work shirts when I heard my mother's voice coming from the kitchen, sharp and conspiratorial. I paused at the top of the stairs, holding my breath, pressing my ear against the cracked door. She was on the phone with Aunt Beatrice. And he just said no. Flat out, no, right to our faces, my mother was saying, her voice dripping with venomous indignation. Arthur is absolutely furious. He says if Caleb wants to act like he's not part of this family, we'll show him exactly what that means. Aunt Beatrice's voice was a faint, tinny murmur on the other end, but I could guess her response was a goading agreement. Arthur's idea is brilliant, actually, my mother continued, her tone shifting to one of gleeful, malicious strategy. We'll do it at the barbecue on Saturday, in front of everyone. Uncle Vance will be there, all the cousins, the neighbors. Arthur is going to make a speech. We'll tell them the whole story. How poor Mason is struggling so hard, and how his wealthy, arrogant brother refuses to lift a single finger to help. We'll give him the ultimatum right there in front of the crowd. Either he helps his family, or he's out of the house. What can he do? He won't want to look like a monster in front of the whole family. He'll crumble. He'll have to give in. My blood ran absolutely cold. It wasn't just a threat anymore. It was a staged performance, a theatrical execution of my character. They were going to stage my public shaming, banking entirely on my deep-seated fear of judgment from the extended family. They would paint me as a cartoon villain, a cold-hearted, greedy miser who would rather see his beloved brother suffer and go bankrupt than part with his precious money. And the sickest part was, they were going to enjoy every second of it. Mason, I had no doubt, was fully in on the plan. He would play the role of the tragic, humbled victim perfectly. I backed away from the door, my heart pounding so hard I thought my ribs would crack. For a brief, terrifying moment, all I felt was a crushing sense of total defeat. How could I possibly fight this? They were my parents. The narrative they spun would be believed by everyone. I was always the quiet one. They were the loud, charismatic hosts. I grabbed my keys, practically ran to my car, and drove straight to Eli's garage, my mind racing a million miles a minute. Eli took one look at my pale, sweating face and knew something was catastrophically wrong. What happened? He asked, pushing his laptop away. I told him everything. The demand, my refusal, the insane conversation I had just overheard. I expected him to be furiously angry on my behalf, to tell me my parents were absolute monsters. He was, and he did. But then he leaned back in his squeaky office chair, and a slow, highly calculating smile began to spread across his face. It was the same smile he got when he figured out a massive shortcut in our code. So, he said, tapping a pen against his chin. They're building a grand stage to humiliate you. Yeah, I said grimly, rubbing my temples. And they're inviting the whole damn town. Well, you know what they say, Eli said, his eyes practically gleaming with mischief. Never waste a good stage. A new, audacious idea began to form in my mind. An idea so incredibly risky and so utterly terrifying that it just might work. The seed of an idea Eli had planted grew into a full-blown, military-grade strategy over the next 2 hours. My parents wanted to use the party as their stage. Fine, I would use it as mine. They were bringing a hostile audience, I would bring a star witness. There was only one person on planet Earth who could detonate their false narrative so completely, so totally, that there would be absolutely no recovery. Mr. Sterling, Marcus Sterling, was the formidable CEO of Apex Systems, a massive, multinational software development firm. For the past 3 agonizing months, Eli and I had been in intense, highly confidential, closed-door negotiations with him and his team of corporate lawyers. Apex wanted to acquire Nexus Flow AI. They were completely blown away by the flawless architecture of our platform, and they saw its massive potential to integrate into their global logistics division. We had spent weeks going back and forth, hammering out the intricate details of a massive buyout. We were on the absolute verge of signing an agreement that would alter the trajectory of our lives forever. It was a life-altering sum of money. The kind of money my parents couldn't even begin to comprehend. The final signing meeting was scheduled for the Monday morning right after the barbecue. It's a crazy ask, I know, I said to Eli, pacing the concrete floor of the garage, kicking a stray power cord. He's a CEO of a billion-dollar company. He doesn't go to suburban family hot dog barbecues. He'll think I'm insane. He might pull the deal. The worst he can say is no, Eli reasoned, pulling up Mr. Sterling's contact card. But Caleb, think about it. The deal is basically done. The lawyers have blessed it. We like him. He likes us. He deeply respects you. He might just do it to protect his investment. My heart was hammering against my ribs. It was the boldest, most aggressive move I had ever considered in my entire life. It felt both completely insane and perfectly logical. With shaking hands, I picked up my phone, dialed his private number, and held my breath. Mr. Sterling, it's Caleb, I said, trying desperately to keep my voice steady. Caleb, good to hear from you. Everything all right? Getting nervous before the big day on Monday? His deep, authoritative voice boomed through the phone, friendly but direct. Everything's perfect with the deal, sir. Actually, I have a personal, and somewhat highly unusual, request. I took a massive breath, and laid it all out. I didn't give him the entire sordid 20-year family history, but I gave him the vital essentials. The long-standing toxic family dynamic, the sudden massive debt, the ultimatum, and their insane plan to publicly shame me at the party on Saturday. And then I made my pitch. They believe I'm an ungrateful son with a moderately successful IT job who is hoarding his small savings, I explained, gripping the edge of Eli's desk. They plan to use intense family pressure to force me to pay a debt that isn't mine. Your presence, and a simple, truthful announcement of what I actually do, would destroy that narrative instantly. There was a long, agonizing pause on the other end of the line. The silence stretched for so long I thought the call had dropped. I thought I had massively overstepped, that I had sounded crazy and unprofessional, and that he was going to cancel the $8.5 million deal right then and there. I was opening my mouth to apologize when I heard him let out a low, rumbling chuckle. Caleb, he said, and I could hear the genuine amusement in his voice. In my 30 years in this cutthroat business, I've seen a lot of vicious sharks in the boardroom. Sounds like you've been dealing with them at your own dinner table. I've always believed that a man's character is just as important as his code. He paused again. I like your boldness, kid. It's the exact same quality that made me want to buy your company. Send me the address. I'll clear my Saturday schedule. I wouldn't miss this for the absolute world. When I hung up the phone, I was trembling violently, but it wasn't from fear. It was from pure, unadulterated adrenaline. The game had completely changed. My parents were setting a trap, completely unaware that I was about to walk into it holding a live grenade. In the days leading up to the party, I became a total ghost in my own home. I adopted a strategy of absolute, unbreakable neutrality. I went to my part-time job, came home, ate dinner in total silence if they were in the kitchen, and retreated to my room. I was polite, quiet, and completely unreadable. This, I quickly realized, was far more unsettling for them than any screaming argument would have been. My silence was a vacuum, and they rushed to fill it with their own arrogant assumptions. They saw my quiet demeanor not as steely resolve, but as fear. They interpreted my lack of fight as a sign that I was weakening, that their psychological warfare was already working, and that on Saturday, I would crumble under the heavy weight of public opinion. During this time, I started to quietly prepare for my exit. In the dead of night, I packed not clothes, but memories. I went through old, dusty boxes in my closet, pulling out a few faded photos of me and my grandmother, my high school diploma, the small plastic trophy I'd won at my first coding hackathon. I placed them carefully in a single cardboard box. It was a pathetically small collection, a testament to a life lived entirely in the margins of my own family. I put the box in the trunk of my car. I didn't pack clothes or furniture. Those were just things. I was leaving the old Caleb behind. Saturday arrived. The weather was oppressively hot and humid. The party was exactly as I expected, a grand symphony of suburban pretense. The backyard was filled with dozens of relatives, neighbors, and family friends making loud small talk, balancing flimsy paper plates of potato salad and grilled chicken, and pretending to be vastly more interested in each other's lives than they actually were. I moved through the sweltering crowd like a shadow, offering polite nods and brief, tight smiles, my stomach churning violently with a mixture of dread and electric anticipation. About an hour in, I saw him. Mr. Sterling arrived, dressed in a casual but clearly expensive navy polo shirt and tailored slacks. He looked less like a ruthless corporate titan and more like a distinguished retiree enjoying his weekend. As planned, I intercepted him near the gate and casually introduced him to my Aunt Beatrice as a former mentor of mine from college. He blended in seamlessly, grabbing a plastic cup of iced tea and making incredibly charming small talk with my Uncle Vance about the current state of the stock market. Nobody gave him a second glance. My parents were in their absolute element, playing the roles of the gracious, perfect hosts to the hilt. My father was holding court by the massive stainless steel grill, laughing far too loudly at his own mediocre jokes, a beer in his hand. My mother was flitting between groups of women, refilling wine glasses, and collecting endless compliments on her landscaping. Mason was soaking up the attention near the patio, retelling the tragic sob story of his failed business to anyone who would listen, casting himself as a young, brilliant visionary who had been unfairly struck down by a stroke of cosmic bad luck. They were laying the heavy groundwork, perfectly seeding the narrative for the main event. Finally, around 3 p.m., my father clinked a pair of metal grilling tongs against his glass, calling for everyone's attention. A hush slowly fell over the crowded backyard. This was it, the execution. "Hey everyone," he began, a broad, benevolent, utterly fake smile plastered on his face. "Diane and I just want to thank you all for coming out today. It means the absolute world to us to have our family and friends here." He paused for dramatic effect, scanning the crowd. Family is the most important thing in this world. It's about being there for each other. In good times, and in bad. His eyes scanned the crowd and locked onto me, standing near the edge of the patio. The benevolent smile tightened into something significantly harder, colder, and recently, our family has faced some very bad times. As many of you know, our youngest son Mason here took a very brave risk to start his own business. He reached out, and put a proud, comforting arm around Mason's shoulders. Unfortunately, due to circumstances completely beyond his control, the market turned, and it didn't work out. It's left him in a very difficult, very scary financial position. Loud murmurs of sympathy rippled through the crowd. "Oh, poor Mason," Aunt Beatrice cooed audibly. Mason looked down at his expensive sneakers, the absolute picture of humility and disappointment. "But," my father continued, his voice rising in volume, taking on the cadence of a preacher, "the beautiful thing about family is that we lift each other up, we all pitch in, and we have been so incredibly proud of our other son, Caleb." He pointed a thick finger directly at me. The spotlight was officially on. "He's done very well for himself with his little tech job. A real promotion, a great new salary. He is in a prime position to help his brother, to lift him up, to do the right, honorable thing." The air in the backyard grew impossibly thick with expectation. I could feel 40 pairs of eyes heavily on me. They weren't just watching, they were actively judging. My mother stepped forward, her voice quivering with a masterful, Oscar-worthy performance of sorrow. But for some reason, Caleb has refused. He flat out refuses to help his own flesh and blood. A collective, highly audible gasp went through the older aunts. Aunt Beatrice shot me a look of pure, venomous disgust. Whispers broke out instantly. Selfish, how could he? Poor Diane. My father took a heavy step toward me, his face a terrifying mask of righteous, unyielding authority. So we're doing this right now, in front of the family that loves and supports you. We are asking you one last time, Caleb. Will you pay Mason's debt and do your basic duty as a son and a brother? Or will you turn your back on this family for good? Because you cannot have it both ways. Either you're with us, or you're out. And if you're out, you can pack your bags and leave our house tonight. He stood there, arms crossed, his chest puffed out, waiting for my inevitable, crushing surrender. The entire party was frozen in time, a tableau of suburban justice. In the deafening silence, I subtly met Mr. Sterling's gaze from across the lawn. I gave him the absolute smallest, almost imperceptible nod. Mr. Sterling set his plastic cup down on a patio table with a soft thud and began to walk forward. The show was finally about to begin. As Mr. Sterling moved, the crowd naturally parted for him. He walked with an easy, terrifying authority that instantly commanded the space. He stopped right beside my father, who looked at him with intense annoyance, clearly irritated by the interruption to his grand, victorious performance. Arthur, isn't it, Mr. Sterling said, his voice calm, smooth, but carrying effortlessly across the dead-silent yard. My name is Marcus Sterling. I think there has been a very slight misunderstanding about Caleb's financial situation. My father scowled deeply, his face reddening. I'm sorry, who the hell are you? This is a private family matter. Ordinarily, it would be, Mr. Sterling replied smoothly, not breaking eye contact. But when it involves one of my company's most valuable assets, I feel incredibly compelled to clarify the record. He turned his body slightly to face the stunned crowd. You see, Arthur is absolutely right that Caleb has done well for himself. But he has his facts completely wrong. Caleb doesn't have a tech job, with a great new salary. A few confused, hushed murmurs started. My parents exchanged a rapid look of total disbelief. Mr. Sterling continued, his voice gaining strength and iron. He isn't just an employee, he is the co-founder and chief architect of his own company, Nexus Flow AI. He is a visionary. And his little computer project, as I've heard it called here today, is actually a revolutionary piece of logistics software that my company, Apex Systems, is currently in the final stages of acquiring. He let that sink in for a heavy moment before delivering the final, devastating, world-shattering blow. We are finalizing the legal papers on Monday morning. The acquisition price for Nexus Flow AI, the company your son built from scratch in a freezing garage, is $8.5 million. The silence that followed was absolute. It was a silence so profound, so heavy, you could hear the distant hum of a lawnmower 3 streets over. $8.5 million. The number hung in the humid air, seeming to physically shimmer in the afternoon sun. I watched my father's face. The smug, righteous anger drained away in a millisecond, replaced by a slack-jawed, completely vacant stare. His skin went from ruddy red to a pale, sickly, terrifying gray. My mother's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes wide with total, unadulterated shock. Mason looked as if he had been physically struck in the stomach with a baseball bat, his mouth opening and closing soundlessly like a fish out of water. Mr. Sterling wasn't finished. He walked over to me and put a firm hand on my shoulder, a gesture of solidarity that was also a massive, clear alignment of corporate power. We at Apex are not just buying a piece of software, we are aggressively investing in elite talent, and Caleb is one of the brightest young talents I have ever encountered. We consider it a massive privilege to be in business with him. He then looked directly back at my father, his friendly demeanor completely gone, replaced by a steely, ruthless coldness that sent shivers down my spine. So, you will have to forgive me if I find it absolutely baffling that you'd be willing to throw away a relationship with a man of his incredible character and caliber over a petty, pathetic $12,000 debt. Frankly, sir, your monumental loss is my massive gain. The spell was violently broken. The backyard erupted in an absolute cacophony of frantic whispers and gasps. The narrative had been utterly shattered into a million pieces. I was no longer the ungrateful, selfish son. I was the secret millionaire, the hidden genius. And my parents were the absolute fools who had just tried to publicly disown their winning lottery ticket over pennies. The looks on the faces of my relatives had shifted rapidly from pity for my parents to a stunned, horrified pity for me. They finally saw it. They saw it all. The years of neglect, the blatant favoritism, the shocking injustice. It was all laid bare in the smoking wreckage of my parents' greed. This was the exact moment everything changed. The moment I finally took back control of my own life. The party disintegrated with record, embarrassing speed. People made incredibly awkward excuses, avoiding eye contact, and slipped out the side gate, desperate not to be caught in the radioactive fallout of the explosion they had just witnessed. They couldn't look my parents in the eye. Within 20 minutes, the only people left in the trashed backyard were me, my parents, Mason, and Mr. Sterling, who had stayed by my side like a highly paid, silent bodyguard. Once the very last guest had scurried away, the silence was replaced by a desperate, clumsy, pathetic attempt at damage control. "Caleb," my mother whispered, taking a very shaky step toward me. Her face was a total mess of confusion, panic, and smeared mascara. The performative tears from before were now very, very real. "Caleb, honey, we didn't understand. We had no idea." "Oh, I think you understood perfectly," I said, my voice completely devoid of any emotion. I felt utterly hollowed out, but in a good way. Clean. You understood that you had a massive problem named Mason, and you thought you had a free solution named Caleb. The only thing you didn't understand was the actual number. My father, having somehow regained a tiny fraction of his color, tried to assert his dominance one last, pathetic time, but it came out as a weak, trembling imitation of his earlier bluster. "Now, hold on just a minute. This is still a private family matter. We can talk about this inside like adults. Mr. Sterling, thank you for your clarification, but we can handle it from here." Mr. Sterling just raised a single eyebrow and looked at me, leaving the absolute power in my hands. "There is absolutely nothing left to talk about," I said, looking directly into my father's terrified eyes. "You gave me an ultimatum. You said, in front of everyone, either I pay Mason's debt, or I am out of the family. Well, I'm not paying." "We didn't mean it like that," my mother wailed, reaching out for my arm. I stepped back, avoiding her touch. "You're our son. We were just trying to teach you a lesson about family responsibility." "No," I said, the word sharp, final, and cutting like a knife. "You taught me my lesson about family a long, long time ago. You taught me that your love is highly conditional. You taught me that my worth is entirely tied to my utility. And today, you just taught me that the only time you see me as your actual son is when you think you can extract something from me." Mason, who had been completely paralyzed until now, finally spoke. His voice was a pathetic, desperate whine. "Bro, come on. It's me, your brother. Are you really going to let this ruin everything between us?" I slowly turned to him, and for the very first time, I think he really saw the absolute stranger I had become. The endless well of patience I had for him was bone dry. "Ruin what, Mason? There is nothing left to ruin. You made your choices, they made theirs, now I am making mine." I turned back to my parents one last time. "You wanted me out of the house. You have your wish. I'll be gone in 5 minutes. And I gave a final nod of immense gratitude to Mr. Sterling. "Thank you for coming, Marcus." "Anytime, Caleb. See you Monday," he said, shaking my hand firmly, a genuine smile returning to his face. Then I turned my back on them. I walked towards the house, leaving the three of them standing there amidst the debris of their ruined party, the half-eaten potato salad, and their completely shattered expectations. I didn't look back. Walking into the house felt radically different. It was no longer my home, or even a place I was temporarily staying. It was just a building. A set of walls filled with cheap furniture and toxic memories that no longer belonged to me. I went straight to my room, grabbed my laptop bag, and walked out the front door. I already had the box of my precious memories safely in my trunk. I got into my car, started the engine, and drove away. As I watched the house shrink in my rearview mirror, I expected to feel grief, or anger, or even triumphant glee, but I didn't. I just felt incredibly, wonderfully light. Update 2. It has been a little over a year since the barbecue. The year that followed was an absolute blur of intense activity, but it was the best kind of chaos. The massive acquisition by Apex Systems went through flawlessly on that Monday morning. Suddenly, Eli and I were not just struggling founders eating ramen, we were division heads within a major global corporation, armed with the immense resources and support to scale Nexus Flow AI far beyond our wildest dreams. The work was incredibly demanding, requiring 80-hour weeks, but it was fulfilling in a way I had never known. Every single success was ours, built entirely on our merit, our brains, and our sweat, not on toxic manipulation or forced family ties. With extreme financial security came a radically different kind of freedom. The very first thing I did after the check cleared was buy a beautiful, modern penthouse condo downtown. It was a clean, minimalist space with massive floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out over the glittering city skyline. The first night I spent there, I slept on a cheap air mattress on the hardwood floor because I hadn't had time to buy any furniture yet. Looking out at the city lights, eating takeout pizza with Eli, I felt more at home than I ever had in my entire 24 years in my parents' house. This space was mine. I had bled for it, and I had earned it. I slowly started to build a real life. I bought actual furniture. I learned to cook proper, healthy meals instead of just surviving. I reconnected with old college friends and made new ones at work. My family became the people who actually showed up for me. Eli and his loud, wonderful family, who absolutely insisted I come over for Sunday dinner every single week. My dedicated team at work, A group of brilliant, hilarious people who shared my intense passion. I also started aggressively investing in myself, not just financially, but emotionally. I started seeing a trauma therapist, Dr. Hayes, to unpack the massive, tangled knot of years of emotional neglect. It was incredibly hard, exhausting work, digging through the deep layers of hurt, rejection, and suppressed anger, but it was vital. She helped me understand a crucial truth: the desperate need my parents had for Mason's success, and their cold indifference to mine, wasn't actually about me or him, it was entirely about them. It was about their own massive insecurities and their desperate need for a reflection they could be proud of to show the neighbors. Mason was a mirror reflecting what they wanted to see. I was a window showing them a world of hard work and quiet dedication they simply didn't understand and felt threatened by. I found intense joy in small, normal things. I joined a weekend hiking club and spent my Saturdays exploring the rugged mountains outside the city, breathing in the clean air. I adopted a rescue dog, a goofy, scruffy golden retriever mix I named Barnaby, whose unconditional, overflowing affection was a daily healing balm on my old emotional wounds. My life wasn't perfect, but it was profoundly authentic. It was a life I was actively choosing and building every single day. Then, 2 weeks ago, something happened that completely threw me for a loop. I was sitting in my new corner office, looking out at the panoramic view that still felt surreal, when my assistant buzzed me. "Caleb, there's a package for you. It looks like it's been forwarded from an incredibly old address." A few minutes later, she brought in a dusty, yellowed shoebox. My old childhood address was crossed out on it, with my new corporate address stamped over it. My name was written on the cardboard in my grandmother's familiar, shaky cursive. It was postmarked over 2.5 years ago, but had clearly been completely lost in the labyrinth of the postal system, sitting in a dead-letter office until someone finally tracked me down. My heart skipped a heavy beat. It was a package from her, sent shortly before she passed away. With trembling hands, I cut the tape and opened it. Inside the box were old, faded photographs, a small leather-bound journal that had belonged to my grandfather, and nestled among them, a sealed letter addressed directly to me. I carefully unfolded the brittle paper and began to read. It was a long, beautiful letter full of her usual immense warmth and wisdom, but one specific paragraph stood out, and it hit me with the sheer force of a physical blow to the chest. "I worry about your father," she wrote, her handwriting dipping. "I know he is incredibly hard on you, Caleb. Please try to understand, though you absolutely do not have to forgive him. His own father, your grandfather, was a very cold, demanding, and cruel man. He saw Arthur not as a beloved son, but as a massive disappointment. All his praise, all his affection, and all his money went to his younger brother, your Uncle Vance. Arthur spent his entire life desperately trying to win a love that was never going to be offered freely. I see him doing the exact same thing to you, repeating a toxic cycle of pain he doesn't even know he's trapped in. He's trying to get from Mason the exact validation his father never, ever gave him. It's not an excuse for how he treats you, my dear boy, but it is a reason." I sat there in my plush leather chair, completely stunned. My father, the absolute tyrant, the unmovable, terrifying force of my childhood, was once just a broken, desperate boy craving his own father's approval. He had been the original Caleb. And instead of going to therapy and breaking the cycle, he had perpetuated it, passing the deep, festering wound down to me, while propping Mason up as his Uncle Vance. It didn't excuse a single thing he did. It didn't erase the 2 decades of profound neglect, the stolen childhood, or the absolute cruelty of that final day at the barbecue, but it cast his horrific actions in a new, deeply tragic light. He wasn't just a cartoon monster. He was a deeply flawed man completely trapped in a psychological prison of his own past, and he had tried to lock me in that dark cell with him. This knowledge settled heavily in my chest, not as forgiveness, but as a kind of sad, final understanding. This could have been my fate, a legacy of pain passed on forever, but I had broken it. As if the universe had a sixth sense of dramatic timing, an email popped up on my computer screen not an hour later. The subject line was "Request for Dialogue." It was from a Dr. Hayes, no relation to my therapist, but a licensed family counselor. "Dear Mr. Caleb," the email began, "I am writing on behalf of my clients, Arthur, Diane, and Mason. They have been in intensive family therapy for the past 6 months. They have expressed a deep, genuine desire to open a line of communication with you in a mediated, safe environment, to take full responsibility for their past actions and to express their profound remorse. They understand and respect that the decision to engage is entirely yours. Should you be open to it, please let me know." I stared at the glowing monitor, my grandmother's brittle letter in one hand, the email in front of me, the past and the future colliding in a single, quiet moment in my office. My father's tragic history explaining his terrible actions. An email offering a potential, highly complicated path forward. For a year, I had felt nothing but the clean, simple, wonderful relief of being completely free. I was the victor, they were the defeated villains. Now, A new, far more complicated feeling began to surface. I sat in my penthouse that evening, the city lights twinkling below like a fallen constellation. Barnaby was asleep at my feet, his gentle snores a comforting rhythm. I thought about what a meeting would actually look like. I pictured the three of them sitting rigidly in a sterile therapist's office, their faces etched with rehearsed remorse. I imagined the tearful apologies, the excuses wrapped in modern therapeutic language. Would it be genuine? Or was it just another highly calculated strategy, a last-ditch effort to get back into the good graces of the son who was now an $8 million success story? Maybe their primary motivation was the painful realization that they had completely alienated their only actual retirement plan. Then I imagined a different, incredibly slim possibility. The possibility that their entire world shattering so completely and publicly on that Saturday had forced a genuine, painful, ego-destroying reckoning. The possibility that permanently losing me had finally made them see exactly what they had done. People could change, couldn't they? I sat with that thought for a long time. And then, I realized something incredibly profound. My freedom wasn't just about physically leaving them behind or having money. True freedom was about having the absolute power of choice. The choice to engage, or the choice to walk away forever, based entirely not on reactive anger or deep hurt, but on my own terms, for my own ultimate well-being. The power was no longer theirs to wield over me, it was mine. I looked at the email, then down at Barnaby, and finally out at the sprawling, beautiful city that I now called home. I didn't owe them my presence. I didn't owe them my forgiveness just because they finally realized they were wrong after it cost them everything. The boy in the faded photograph was finally in absolute control. He was no longer shivering on the edge of the frame. He was the one holding the camera. I moved my hand to the keyboard, opened a reply window, and began to type my final response. Dr. Hayes, I appreciate that your clients are seeking help, and I genuinely hope they find peace. However, I have built a peaceful, fulfilling life for myself, and I do not wish to reopen closed doors or revisit the past. I decline the invitation for mediation. Please inform your clients that I wish them well, but I request that they do not contact me again. I hit send. I closed the laptop with a satisfying click. I grabbed Barnaby's leash, and we walked out into the cool evening air, leaving the ghosts of the past exactly where they belonged, behind me.